The ocean at night is a vast and endless horizon, where the line between water and sky is softened until it almost disappears. Gentle waves shift against one another in silence, broken only by the faint creak of a vessel drifting across their surface. There is no storm, no wind, only the quiet weight of darkness pressing in from all sides. For those awake at such hours, keeping watch beneath the scattered stars, it is a time when the imagination begins to wander, when the mind recalls whispers of what might lie beneath. Sailors have always felt it, that magnetic pull of the sea at night, a pull not just on their vessels but on their thoughts and fears. In those hours, the surface becomes a fragile skin stretched thin across unknown depths. Beneath that surface, there are leagues of water layered one upon another, a silence so deep it feels eternal. The sound of the hull shifting is the only reminder that something solid separates man from the abyss. The ocean has been described as a mirror, but at night it is more like a wall, a black and unbroken expanse that gives nothing back. Even the moon, when it shines, seems weaker on these waters, as if reluctant to pierce too far. It is not a hostile scene, not a raging tempest. Instead, the unease comes from calmness itself, the knowledge that thousands of feet of water stretch down into blackness, hiding whatever the imagination dares to conjure. For centuries, sailors told one another stories in whispers during these night watches. Tales of shapes rising briefly before sinking back, of sudden shadows larger than any ship, of faint lights flickering deep under the keel. Some were meant to frighten, some to entertain, but all came from the same unspoken truth. No one really knew what lived down there. Even today, with science and sonar, with maps and submersibles, the same unease lingers. We map the skies more easily than the seabed. The deep ocean still resists, and every exploration opens more questions than it answers. Silence is its first defense, darkness its second. Together, they are enough to turn the mind inward, searching for explanations it cannot find. When standing on deck in such silence, the only sounds may be the breathing of one's own body, the heartbeat muffled by distance, the faint slap of water against the hull. The stillness has a weight, pressing against the ears until even small noises seem magnified. It is in that pressure that thoughts turn to mystery, to what the depths keep concealed. The idea of creatures, unseen and unknown, comes naturally. The possibility that some part of the sea remains untouched by time, holding forms of life from eras long forgotten, becomes believable in such stillness. The ocean does not need to roar to intimidate. Its power lies in the endlessness of its silence. Those who have crossed vast oceans speak of a sense of being watched, though from no direction in particular. The feeling rises unbidden, as if something beneath the waves has taken notice of the ship above. Rational minds dismiss it as imagination, but the sensation persists. The surface reflects nothing back, gives no reassurance, only that black expanse stretching on forever. The calm sea does not soothe, it unsettles. Men who faced storms sometimes recalled them as less frightening than those nights when the water lay completely still. At least storms announced themselves. The silent ocean revealed nothing. Imagine yourself standing there, alone, with nothing but the rhythm of your breathing and the slow roll of black water under the stars, your eyes straining into a darkness that never ends. Generations of explorers felt the same. They came with lanterns, then with electric lights, then with cameras and sonar, and still the sea withheld its truths. The deeper they looked, the stranger the discoveries became. Creatures glowing in the dark, wrecks resting like tombs, sounds that seemed to come from nowhere. But in those earliest hours, long before the technology, it was only the sailor and the silence. Stories were passed along, shaped into myths, exaggerated perhaps, but rooted in genuine encounters with the unknown. The sense of awe, the quiet terror, was never invented, it was experienced. To stand before the ocean at night is to understand how small a human being is. The midnight ocean is not only a physical space but an atmosphere, a place where the ordinary boundaries of time and distance dissolve. The surface conceals not only depth but memory, the accumulated experiences of those who came before. Every whisper of rigging, every ripple of current, seems like part of a much older conversation, one that has continued for as long as men have dared to float upon these waters. That conversation has no end, because the ocean itself never reveals its final word. It gives fragments, glimpses, enough to fuel both fear and wonder, but never enough to satisfy. The darkness stretches on, and within it lie mysteries that will not rise, not tonight, perhaps not ever. And so the ocean holds its silence, leaving only the watcher to imagine what stirs far below. Beneath the rolling swells of the North Atlantic lies a name that has never faded from memory. Titanic. The sound of it alone conjures images of a ship built for glory, a ship that embodied ambition and confidence, brought down on its maiden voyage. Yet more haunting than the iceberg or the panic above deck is what came after: the slow descent into silence. When the ship slipped beneath the surface, it crossed into a world that would keep it hidden for generations. For decades, people imagined where it might rest, what condition it might be in, and whether anyone would ever look upon it again. In those long years of absence, Titanic became more than a shipwreck. It became a symbol of the deep itself, a reminder that the ocean holds its secrets tightly. The rediscovery in the 1980s felt like reopening a sealed tomb. The first grainy images of broken steel stirred or more than fear. Rivets, railings, and chandeliers sat in eerie stillness, no longer belonging to human hands but claimed by the sea. Explorers who watched the cameras descend spoke of hushed silence, as though they had entered a cathedral. The wreck was not just a grave but a museum frozen in time. Dinner plates still rested neatly on the seabed, shoes lay scattered where lives had ended, and steel beams loomed out of the dark like monuments. The ship's grandeur had not disappeared, it had only been transformed into something spectral. It showed the world not only the tragedy of 1912 but also the permanence of the ocean's embrace. Those who looked at those first images felt nostalgia mingled with unease. Here was the greatest liner of its age, brought low not by war but by ice and hubris, preserved not in memory alone but in cold salt water. It reminded everyone that human triumphs are fragile when set against the vastness of nature. The Titanic became the ultimate example of how quickly the sea can erase noise and light, leaving behind silence and darkness. Even in decay, the wreck still carried dignity. Barnacles crusted its sides, strange fish slipped past broken windows, and the current swirled dust through empty corridors. Time had moved on, yet here, in the quiet depths, time seemed irrelevant. The ship lay exactly as the ocean allowed it to remain. The sight altered how humanity thought about the deep sea. Until then, many still imagined the depths as barren plains, void of detail, unreachable and unknowable. But the discovery proved that memory could endure underwater, and that the ocean floor could hold entire worlds of history. It shifted perception. The deep was no longer just an abstract abyss but a place where human stories lay preserved. Visiting Titanic was like stepping back in time, a reminder that the ocean was both a destroyer and a guardian. It took lives and steel, but in taking them, it also kept them safe from the erasure of land and weather. The wreck became a paradox, at once an open wound and a time capsule. Some call Titanic the most famous graveyard in the world, yet many hesitate to think of it that way. It is also a museum, a place where history rests undisturbed, where objects lie as if waiting to be touched again. The images of staircases and hull plates revealed more than metal. They revealed the persistence of memory. What once shone with polished brass now glows faintly with the green of the sea, but the sense of scale and wonder remains. Even through the gloom, the outlines of grandeur endure. To see Titanic is to be reminded that the ocean is not empty but filled with stories locked in darkness. And it is to accept that some stories are best left in silence, where the weight of water keeps them safe from intrusion. A word count, 671. In the early 1930s, when most people thought of the deep sea as a place unreachable and empty, two men decided to challenge that belief. William Beebe, a naturalist with a restless curiosity, and Otis Barton, an engineer determined to make the impossible possible, built a vessel that looked more like a steel ball than a submarine. They called it the bathysphere. It had no propellers, no control of its own, and no way to maneuver once it was lowered into the sea. Instead, it was suspended by a thick steel cable and lowered slowly into the Atlantic off the coast of Bermuda. From the deck of a ship above, others watched anxiously as the heavy sphere disappeared into the water, carrying its two passengers into a world no human eyes had ever seen before. The bathysphere itself was cramped, barely large enough for two men to sit pressed together among gauges and a single small window. There was no comfort inside, only the assurance of thick steel meant to withstand pressure. The deeper it sank, the greater that pressure grew, threatening to crush the sphere like a fragile shell. The creaking of metal was constant, a reminder of what surrounded them. Yet despite the danger, Beebe and Barton pressed on. For them, the risk was worth it, for they were seeking glimpses of life hidden beyond the reach of sunlight. Every foot of descent brought not just darkness but the possibility of revelation. Through the narrow quartz window, they saw shapes begin to appear. At first, it was the familiar shimmer of fish and drifting jellyfish, but as the sphere sank deeper, the creatures grew stranger. Some glowed with their own light, flashing blues and greens in the black water. Others were transparent, bodies almost invisible except for the faint outlines of organs glowing like lanterns. Many had never been recorded before, and some were never seen again after those dives. The ocean seemed alive with forms that defied imagination, each one adapted to a world of crushing weight and total night. For Bibi, who carefully described what he saw, it was like looking into a living starfield, each flicker of light a sign of something utterly alien yet profoundly real. The surface world followed their progress through radio communication. Each message was relayed from below: depth, temperature, the extraordinary sights. Newspapers carried the accounts, and for the first time, the public could picture what lay beneath the waves in detail. It was not an empty wasteland but a realm of glowing, shifting beings. The dives captured the imagination of a generation, filling minds with visions of creatures that looked more like visitors from other worlds than fish of the sea. It changed how people thought about the ocean, showing that the abyss was not lifeless but overflowing with mystery. Inside the bathysphere, the experience was more than scientific, it was deeply personal. The thick glass window became a portal to another dimension, and the silence of the deep made every sight feel sacred. There was no movement they could make, no path they could choose. They were suspended between life above and the crushing darkness below, allowed only a brief glimpse into a hidden world. Every minute felt stretched by the pressure, every second weighted with both fear and wonder. And yet, in that stillness, there was awe, a realization that the ocean contained not just water but entire universes of life waiting to be seen. When they finally returned to the surface, pulled slowly back into the light of day, Bibi and Barton emerged not as adventurers but as messengers. They had not conquered the deep, they had only been permitted to visit it. Their descriptions were written down, sketched, and remembered, giving the world its first clear picture of the abyss. Even now, those accounts carry a tone of reverence, as though the bathysphere had opened a door that perhaps should never have been opened at all. For though they returned safely, the sea made it clear that its mysteries were not easily given, only briefly shown before the darkness closed again. And as more expeditions prepared to follow in their path, the question remained: what deeper wonders, or terrors, might still be waiting below? And so the story of the bathysphere ends not with closure, but with a quiet invitation toward the next descent, where the unknown only grows darker and more compelling. The 1950s and 1960s marked a turning point in how the deep sea was experienced, not only by the few who dared to descend but also by the many who remained on land. Until then, exploration had depended on the words of divers, scientists, and adventurers who described what they saw. Their sketches and recollections were vivid, but always subject to doubt, interpretation, and exaggeration. That changed with the arrival of cameras built to endure the ocean's pressure and darkness. For the first time, the eyes of the public could travel downward with explorers, sharing insights that had once belonged only to those few brave enough to risk descent. The ocean began to reveal itself not through whispers, but through images. The first undersea cameras were not elegant machines. They were heavy, awkward boxes sealed tightly against intrusion, lowered slowly on cables or attached to submersibles. The equipment was crude by today's standards, but what it achieved was revolutionary. Grainy black and white reels returned from the depths, their flickering frames alive with ghostly outlines. Strange fish, illuminated briefly by artificial light, drifted across the lens. Shadows of forms both recognizable and alien appeared, sometimes for only a second before vanishing again into darkness. To those who watched on land, the footage was haunting. It confirmed that the deep was not empty, that life thrived even where light could not reach. These early films carried a quality that words never could. The stillness of the water, the way silt rose and swirled when disturbed, the eerie drift of creatures caught unaware by the glow of lamps, such details gave a sense of immediacy. The ocean no longer belonged only to sailors' tales or scientists' descriptions. Now, audiences could see the same shapes, the same dim flashes of life, and feel the same unease as if they were peering through the glass themselves. The recordings, though limited, created a shared experience of mystery, one that deepened the collective fascination with the abyss. Imagine sitting in a dimly lit room, watching those first films as they play on a projector, the hum of the reels blending with the faint, distant images of creatures drifting across the screen. For scientists, these cameras became tools as important as nets and sonar. Each frame could be studied, replayed, and examined for patterns of movement or behavior. Species previously glimpsed only once could now be documented in motion. Unfamiliar organisms were captured with a clarity that transformed rumor into evidence. In some cases, entirely new species were recorded, proving that the deep contained more life than anyone had guessed. And yet, just as often, the images only deepened the mystery. Unidentifiable blurs and fleeting shadows appeared in the footage, leaving researchers unsure whether they had seen a known creature, a trick of light, or something entirely unknown. To the public, the films took on a mythic quality. Broadcasts and documentaries shared the clips with millions of viewers, igniting both wonder and fear. The deep sea, once imagined as barren, became a place of ghostly abundance. Every flicker of movement suggested the possibility of monsters. Every shadow hinted at something vast beyond the frame. The fact that the footage was grainy and imperfect only added to its power. The distortions and imperfections gave the impression of looking into another world, one that was never fully within reach. It was as though the ocean allowed glimpses but refused to show its face clearly. These cameras did more than reveal. They created a bond between surface and depth. They showed that technology could pierce at least part of the ocean's veil, though never completely. The images were not answers but questions, inviting more exploration, more curiosity, and more daring expeditions. They suggested that for every creature captured on film, there were countless others still hidden in the blackness just beyond the lens. The recordings did not end speculation, they fueled it. For once people had seen with their own eyes the shadows of the abyss, they could no longer accept the idea that the deep was empty. It was alive, it was strange, and it was waiting. And with those flickering black and white frames, the stage was set for an era where every dive, every descent, and every new camera would promise not certainty, but deeper mysteries still. The ocean has always been a keeper of names, some etched in history and others lost to silence. In the centuries before modern tracking, countless ships vanished into the waves without farewell. Their crews sailed proudly from harbors, their flags fluttering in the wind, their holds filled with cargo or hope. Families watched from the shore, expecting their return. Weeks passed into months, and months into years, until waiting turned to mourning. These vessels never returned, and no wreckage washed ashore. For those left behind, the unanswered question of what happened at sea became a story that could never close. The ocean absorbed not just the ships but the memories, leaving only echoes carried on through rumor and fading recollection. The earliest expeditions were often voyages of discovery, men setting sail for unknown lands, guided by crude maps and fragile instruments. Storms rose without warning, reefs tore through hulls, and sudden squalls swept ships off course. Many expeditions recorded proudly in their beginnings ended in blank pages, their final chapters unwritten. In ports across the world, people spoke in hushed tones of ships last seen disappearing over the horizon, their masts vanishing into mist. Some said they had been cursed, others that they had fallen into the grip of monsters or vanished into hidden currents that pulled them to the bottom. Each theory grew more elaborate with time, yet none could resolve the emptiness left by their absence. Loss at sea carried a special weight because it left no closure. On land, ruins and graves remained to be visited, touched, and remembered. At sea, there was only absence. A vanished ship left behind no gravestone, no marker to comfort the grieving. Families held on to fragments, an old uniform, a letter, a photograph, but never the final resting place. For many, the ocean became both a thief and a graveyard, a vast expanse that swallowed their loved ones in silence. The sound of waves breaking on the shore might have carried comfort for some, but for others it became a reminder that somewhere beneath, a story remained unfinished. There are records of ships whose names survive but whose fates remain unknown. Official logs mark their departure but not their arrival. Insurance companies wrote them off as losses, and newspapers printed short notices of disappearance. Yet behind each report were hundreds of lives, each with dreams, families, and stories cut short. Even now, maritime historians trace old shipping routes, wondering where these vessels rest. The ocean floor is littered with wrecks, some identified and others anonymous, and among them are the skeletons of these lost expeditions. Their steel or timber lies draped in coral, but their names have drifted into obscurity, remembered only in fragments of local lore. Imagine standing on a quiet pier at dusk, listening to the creak of ropes and the slap of waves, while thinking of ships that set out from such places and never returned. The echoes of these expeditions are not entirely silent. In some cases, artifacts wash ashore decades later, a plank, a chest, a piece of rigging weathered by salt. These fragments serve as whispers from the deep, proof that something once floated proudly on the surface before being claimed by the abyss. Divers in later generations sometimes discover wrecks unexpectedly, stumbling upon timbers half buried in sand or cannons crusted with barnacles. In those moments, the line between past and present blurs. The ocean, which had hidden the truth for centuries, allows only the faintest glimpse of what it holds. Nostalgia lingers in these stories because they are not simply tales of disaster, but reminders of courage and curiosity. Men boarded ships knowing the risks, driven by the desire to see what lay beyond familiar horizons. They carried with them maps inked with uncertainty, dreams of wealth, or the hope of bringing knowledge home. Their failure to return does not diminish their journeys. It deepens them, transforming them into mysteries that stretch beyond the reach of time. Each vanished expedition is both a tragedy and a testament to the unyielding pull of the unknown. The theme of loss and memory that echoes through these vanished expeditions becomes part of the larger rhythm of the ocean itself. It is a rhythm of beginnings without endings, of stories half-told, of silences heavier than words. Every shipwreck discovered today, every charted ruin, is a reminder that countless others remain unnamed and unmarked. The sea is vast enough to conceal them indefinitely, yet not vast enough to erase their echoes. They remain, suspended between history and legend, quietly shaping the way we think about the deep. And so, as we move forward into tales of wrecks that can be touched and submarines that can be found, the silence of those expeditions that left no trace will continue to haunt the background, reminding us that mystery is not always what is seen but what is forever unseen. During the Second World War, the oceans became silent battlefields, and beneath their surfaces moved machines designed for stealth and destruction. German U-boats, narrow steel vessels bristling with torpedoes, slipped into the Atlantic and prowled shipping lanes in search of prey. For sailors on the surface, they were phantoms, unseen until it was too late. Convoys feared the sudden torpedo strike, the roar of an explosion, and the chaos of a ship breaking apart in the night. But just as many U-boats struck fear, so too did they meet their own end in the deep. Hundreds were destroyed in battle, hunted by depth charges and aircraft, or caught by mines they could not detect. Today, they remain far below, frozen in their final moments, silent shapes on the seabed that speak of war without words. The image of a U-boat resting on the ocean floor is a haunting one. Some lie intact, their hulls rusting but still recognizable, while others are torn open, their remains scattered across the sand. Inside many of these wrecks lie crews who never escaped. Trapped in their metal shells, they became part of the submarine itself, their final resting place sealed by pressure and time. Unlike soldiers who fell on land, their graves cannot be visited. They remain locked beneath the waves, their names carved only into memorials on shore. For those who descend to these wrecks, the silence is almost unbearable. The idea of standing before a steel coffin containing dozens of lives lost decades ago is enough to bring even seasoned divers to a quiet reverence. The sea has preserved them in strange ways. Currents sweep silt across the decks, fish dart in and out of open hatches, and corals claim the steel as their foundation. Over time, the U-boats have become reefs, supporting new life while concealing old death. Yet even as nature reclaims them, the sense of human presence remains. Portholes stare out like blind eyes, propellers sit motionless in the sand, and the outlines of gun mounts hint at what once was a weapon of terror. In these details, history lingers. The machines that once stalked the seas are now stalked themselves by shadows of fish and the slow advance of decay. For historians, the wrecks are time capsules. They reveal not only the technology of their era but also the desperation of a war fought on every front, including beneath the water. Some U-boats went down with records still aboard, radios silent forever, missions incomplete. Others carried evidence of hurried repairs, modifications, or damage from earlier battles. Each wreck is a frozen page in the story of the Atlantic War, a page never turned but preserved by salt and silence. Divers and archaeologists who study them often describe the same feeling, an odd mixture of technical curiosity and quiet sorrow. They are reminders of ingenuity, but also of the cost of conflict. Imagine hovering above such a wreck, the dim light from a submersible's lamp falling across rusted steel, the outlines of the hull stretching into shadow, the ocean pressing in from all sides. For the families of those who never returned, the knowledge that their loved ones rest in such places is both painful and consoling. Painful, because the graves are unreachable. Consoling, because the sea has kept them safe from disturbance. Naval tradition often designates such wrecks as war graves, never to be entered, never to be looted. They are left to the ocean, their stillness respected by those who know what lies within. Over time, the steel will collapse, the ocean will reclaim every rivet, but until then they remain solemn monuments. The presence of these submarines also lingers in memory because of the fear they once spread. Entire shipping routes were altered, convoys invented new tactics, and lives were shaped by their threat. To know that many of them now lie rusting in silence is to recognize how quickly power becomes relic. They remind us that every engine of war eventually falls quiet. Every weapon becomes an artifact. What once was a predator becomes part of the sea flu, a silent reef, a memory held in salt and steel. These U-boats will never rise again. They sleep beneath the waves, their patrols unfinished, their crews eternally aboard. They are part of the ocean now, folded into its history, their echoes carried not by sound but by silence. And as we turn to other submarines that vanished under stranger circumstances, the quiet resting places of these wrecks remind us that what is hidden beneath the surface often holds both fear and reverence together. The decades after the Second World War brought with them not peace, but a new kind of tension. Beneath the surface of the oceans, an invisible contest was being fought between two powers who distrusted one another completely. Submarines became more than weapons. They became symbols of secrecy, endurance, and silent threat. Unlike the U-boats of the past, these new machines carried nuclear capabilities, advanced sonar, and the promise of vanishing into the abyss for weeks at a time. Yet for all their sophistication, many never returned. Both American and Soviet vessels disappeared into the deep during those years, their losses explained only in fragments, their final stories blurred by politics and silence. To this day, their wrecks rest as quiet questions at the bottom of the sea. When a submarine failed to surface, the first explanations were usually mechanical. A reactor might have failed, a torpedo might have malfunctioned, or a fire might have broken out within the sealed steel hull. Submarines were marvels of engineering, but they were also fragile in their own way, machines built to withstand crushing depths but vulnerable to the smallest mistake. A single valve, a single electrical spark, could cascade into catastrophe. Sailors lived with this knowledge every day, training endlessly for emergencies they prayed would never come. Sometimes they succeeded, and sometimes, without warning, the sea claimed the vessel before anyone could respond. In other cases, the explanations were less clear. Some submarines vanished during patrols, their last communications routine, their final positions uncertain. Search efforts combed thousands of square miles, deploying ships and aircraft, yet no trace was found for years. When wrecks were finally discovered, they often lay in pieces, the cause of their destruction still debated. The secrecy of the Cold War made truth even harder to find. Each side was reluctant to admit mistakes, hesitant to share information, and eager to spread rumors that might weaken their rival. The result was a shroud of uncertainty that endures even now. For the families of those lost, the absence of answers was an added cruelty. They knew only that their loved ones had gone beneath the waves and not returned. No bodies were recovered, no funerals held in familiar cemeteries. Instead, they were left with memorials carved in stone, and the haunting thought of men entombed in steel far below. The ocean gave no closure, only silence. Governments issued statements, sometimes vague, sometimes contradictory, but never complete. And so the losses became more than personal tragedies. They became mysteries, remembered in fragments and questions rather than clear conclusions. Imagine a submarine drifting quietly on patrol, its crew unaware that their next hour will be their last, the darkness outside pressing against the hull while within, the hum of machinery masks the approach of disaster. Theories began to grow, some rooted in technical speculation, others drifting into the unknown. Some suggested espionage, collisions, or weapons gone wrong. Others whispered of encounters beyond human understanding, strange sonar echoes, shadows without explanation, or sudden forces that overwhelmed even the strongest hulls. These ideas found fertile ground because the ocean itself resists certainty. Its depths are vast enough to conceal every kind of possibility. When a vessel disappears into that silence, even the most rational mind wonders if the explanation is larger than engineering failure or human error. Over time, more wrecks were located, charted by deep-diving vehicles and sonar. Yet even when the sites were confirmed, the questions did not vanish. The twisted metal told part of the story, but never all of it. The final minutes of the cruise, their last choices, their final words, all of these remained hidden. The ocean kept those details for itself. To look upon such wrecks is to stand at the edge of knowledge, to see only enough to confirm that something terrible happened, but never enough to understand why. These disappearing submarines remind us that the Cold War was not only a struggle of ideologies but also a series of quiet tragedies hidden beneath the sea. They are stories without endings, patrols without returns, questions without answers. And as we move to examine one particularly haunting case, their silence deepens the sense that the sea itself guards more secrets than we will ever know. In the spring of 1968, the submarine USS Scorpion set out on what was meant to be a routine patrol. It was a familiar path, one her crew had traveled before, slipping quietly through the Atlantic with orders to observe, to report, and to return. She was a nuclear-powered submarine, a testament to American engineering and the growing reach of Cold War technology. Yet on her journey home, the Scorpion vanished. Communications stopped, signals fell silent, and weeks of searching revealed nothing. For the families of the 99 men aboard, each passing day stretched into a painful uncertainty. When word finally came, it was not of survivors but of a loss that could not yet be explained. The Scorpion had joined the list of submarines that disappeared without warning, her final hours hidden beneath the sea. The wreck was eventually found months later, lying broken on the seabed more than 2 miles below the surface. The images returned from the depths were stark: torn metal, collapsed sections of hull, and the unmistakable evidence of sudden catastrophe. Yet the cause of that catastrophe remained frustratingly unclear. Submarines were complex machines, filled with moving parts and volatile systems, any one of which could fail. But in the case of the Scorpion, theories multiplied rather than narrowed. Each explanation carried weight, yet none could be proven fully. And so the wreck itself became less a solution than a starting point for decades of speculation. One possibility was mechanical failure. The Scorpion had a history of technical problems, maintenance delays, and concerns about her reliability. Some suggested that a malfunction in her machinery triggered a cascade of failures too rapid for the crew to contain. Another theory pointed to the submarine's torpedoes, suggesting that one may have armed itself prematurely, circling back toward the vessel it was meant to protect. The idea of a weapon turning against its own crew carried a chilling irony, and though evidence was debated, the theory never faded. Still others wondered if the submarine had collided with something unseen, struck by accident in the vastness of the ocean. Each possibility seemed plausible, yet each left unanswered questions. The secrecy of the Cold War only deepened the mystery. Both the United States and the Soviet Union monitored submarine movements closely, and whispers circulated of confrontations hidden from public view. Some speculated that the Scorpion may have been shadowed, perhaps even attacked. Others dismissed such ideas as Cold War paranoia, pointing instead to the more mundane hazards of mechanical stress and human error. But because official reports often conflicted or left details vague, the loss took on a mythic quality. People filled the silence with their own explanations, and the truth remained elusive, resting as deeply as the submarine itself. Imagine drifting in a small submersible near the wreck, the beams of light catching twisted steel and broken compartments, the silence pressing in from every side, while knowing that beneath this ruin lie the unanswered questions of 99 lives. For the families of the crew, the loss was made harder by the lack of clarity. They were told of possibilities but never certainties. Memorials were held, names engraved in stone, but the ocean kept the final details locked away. The wreck of the Scorpion became both a grave and an enigma, a place where grief and mystery were inseparable. Divers and remote vehicles who visited the site spoke of its eerie quiet, the feeling that the submarine was not simply wreckage but a presence, holding onto its secrets. Today, the Scorpion still lies where it fell, a relic of Cold War tension and the fragility of even the most advanced machines. The steel is rusting, the currents moving through its remains, but the mystery endures. Mechanical failure, torpedo malfunction, collision, or something darker, each theory lingers, none proven. The ocean, indifferent and impenetrable, has preserved the wreck as a monument to uncertainty. And as we leave the story of the Scorpion, we turn toward other wrecks of the Atlantic, vessels less known but no less haunting, their ghosts rising only in fragments from the deep. The Atlantic Ocean is often remembered for its great tragedies, for names like Titanic or Lusitania, stories that fill books and echo through history. Yet scattered across the same waters lie countless other wrecks, ships that never claimed headlines, whose names have faded until even descendants may no longer remember them. These were merchant vessels, coastal liners, fishing trawlers, and passenger ships of smaller renown, swallowed by storms or accidents, sometimes by war. Their stories were briefly noted in local newspapers, a column or two recording their departure and their disappearance, before being replaced by the next news of the day. What remains now are not tales etched in memory but ghostly shapes resting quietly on the seabed, their presence marked only by silence. Many of these wrecks were victims of storms, the kind that rise suddenly in the Atlantic and sweep across the waves with unforgiving force. Wooden hulls splintered, iron ships rolled helplessly, and cargo spilled into the sea. Survivors, when there were any, spoke of waves higher than rooftops, of winds that tore sails to ribbons and snapped masts like twigs. Yet for every ship whose survivors told the tale, there were others that vanished entirely, leaving no voices behind to describe their final hours. Families ashore received only the report that their loved ones were gone, their vessels overdue and presumed lost. The ocean provided no evidence, only absence. With time, the details eroded, leaving little more than a name on an old manifest or the faint memory of a voyage never completed. The Atlantic's floor has become a graveyard for these forgotten ships. Some lie half-buried in sand, timbers scattered and indistinguishable from the seabed. Others remain eerily intact, their cabins still outlined, their holds still full of the goods they once carried. Currents sweep through their corridors now, fish drift lazily where passengers once ate, and coral claims their decks as new territory. Divers who stumble upon such wrecks often describe the stillness as unnerving. There is no story to frame what they see, no famous disaster to give the sight context. The wreck simply exists, anonymous, silent, its history drowned long ago. From time to time, these forgotten vessels make themselves known again. Fishermen drag up fragments of timber or rusted fittings in their nets. Storms shift the sand, exposing hulls that had been hidden for decades. Archaeologists, following faint clues, occasionally uncover entire wrecks preserved far better than expected. In such moments, the past feels close again, as if the sea allows a whisper of memory to surface before sinking it once more. Yet even with these discoveries, many of the names remain obscure, known only to specialists or to the families who never stopped wondering what became of their kin. Imagine descending to such a wreck, the water dark and still, your light falling across a deck that once echoed with footsteps but now holds only shadows and drifting silt. The eeriness of these sights comes not only from their anonymity but also from their sheer number. The Atlantic has claimed thousands of ships over the centuries, each with its own crew, its own story, and its own silence. Unlike the celebrated tragedies, these ships have no monuments, no preserved artifacts displayed in museums. Their memory lies only in the ocean itself, in the quiet persistence of their remains. They are the ghost fleet of the Atlantic, not recorded in detail, not remembered in story, but present all the same. These anonymous graves remind us that the ocean is not selective. It takes great liners and humble trawlers alike, holding them with equal indifference. It reduces fame and obscurity to the same end, steel corroding in the salt, wood rotting in the dark. To know that such a multitude rests unseen beneath the surface is to feel the immensity of loss that the sea has carried, a loss spread not across a handful of great disasters but across centuries of smaller ones, each no less final. And as we leave these forgotten wrecks behind, our gaze turns toward other submarines of another era, vessels lost to secrecy and speculation, their mysteries tied not to storms but to shadows of intent and silence. Beneath the quiet stretches of the Pacific lie the remains of a fleet built in secrecy and sent into battle with ambitions as vast as the empire they served. During the Second World War, the Imperial Japanese Navy developed one of the most diverse and experimental submarine forces the world had ever seen. Their vessels were not merely hunters of merchant ships but carriers of strange weapons, long-range machines built for missions few imagined possible. Some carried aircraft in sealed hangars, others were designed to launch suicide torpedoes, and still others sought to strike distant shores far beyond the horizon. They sailed under the banner of strategy and desperation, and many never returned. Today, their steel frames rest unseen, scattered across the ocean floor, their missions unfinished and their stories muffled by the silence of salt water. These submarines reflected both ingenuity and urgency. Some of the designs were unlike anything deployed by other navies. The massive I-class boats, in particular, were built with astonishing range, able to cross oceans and linger far from home. They carried floatplanes folded into waterproof compartments, intended to be launched at sea to scout or strike unexpected targets. One mission even aimed to bomb American forests in hopes of igniting fires that would spread panic. Yet for all their daring ideas, the submarines often found themselves vulnerable against the growing strength of Allied anti-submarine tactics. Depth charges, aircraft patrols, and advanced sonar turned the seas into a hunting ground, and one by one, these unusual machines disappeared into the depths. The losses came swiftly in the final years of the war. Records show patrols that left Japanese harbors and never returned, their last signals fading into silence. Some were known to have been sunk in battle, explosions echoing through the water as destroyers pursued them. Others simply vanished, leaving no trace, no survivors, and no certainty. In the aftermath, when Japan surrendered, many of these submarines were deliberately scuttled, sunk by their own crews or by Allied forces to prevent their technology from being studied or spread. Entire classes of submarine innovation were erased in this way, their secrets left entombed in the wrecks themselves. For divers and historians, the discovery of such wrecks carries a peculiar fascination. To descend upon the ruins of an I-class submarine is to confront both history and mystery. The sheer size of the hull, longer than many surface ships of its day, speaks to the scale of ambition. Coral encrusts the conning tower, fish drift through broken compartments, and the silence of the deep is broken only by the faint groan of currents pressing against steel. Each vessel holds not only the memory of war but also of experimentation, of attempts to bend technology toward dreams of victory that were never realized. Some wrecks still hold aircraft wings folded in their compartments, ghostly remnants of missions never flown. Imagine drifting alongside such a vessel, your light tracing the curve of a rusting hull that stretches beyond sight, while within its walls, silence has replaced the voices of men who once moved with urgency. Secrecy has always cloaked these submarines, both in their construction and in their loss. Many records were destroyed in the final days of the war, leaving only fragments for researchers to piece together. Survivors rarely spoke in detail, and official accounts remain vague or contradictory. The result is a shroud of uncertainty, where the truth of some missions may never be known. Were certain submarines sunk in battle, or scuttled deliberately to keep secrets hidden? Did experimental weapons malfunction, leading to disaster before they could be tested in combat? The ocean floor holds the answers, but it guards them closely. Today, these submarines serve as quiet monuments to ambition undone by time. They are relics of a navy that sought to reshape warfare beneath the sea, but whose machines now lie as habitats for fish and coral. Their steel once carried innovation, desperation, and lives devoted to impossible missions. Now it carries only silence. They are not celebrated like great battleships, nor remembered like legendary carriers. Instead, they linger in obscurity, lost forever, a reminder that even the boldest designs eventually fade into rust and shadow beneath the waves. And as we move from their story, the stillness they embody leads us toward another disaster at sea, one that unfolded not in secrecy but in the full view of a watching world. In the year 2000, long after the Cold War had ended and the world believed submarine tragedies belonged to an earlier age, a disaster unfolded in the Barents Sea that reminded everyone of the ocean's unforgiving nature. The Kursk was among the most advanced submarines in the Russian fleet, a pride of modern engineering, built to patrol silently and strike with devastating power if needed. On a summer day in August, it participated in naval exercises watched closely by officials and sailors alike. Yet beneath the surface, in the cold waters of the Arctic, something went catastrophically wrong. The submarine failed to return, its silence stretching into hours, then days, as the first whispers of tragedy grew louder. When news broke that the Kursk had suffered an accident, the details came slowly, wrapped in uncertainty and official caution. Initial reports suggested technical problems, perhaps a malfunction that forced the crew to the seabed. But soon it became clear the situation was far worse. Explosions had ripped through the forward compartments, crippling the submarine and sending it crashing to the ocean floor. The water pressure of the Barents Sea pressed against its steel hull with crushing force, turning the submarine into a prison for the men inside. Rescue efforts began, but time was not on their side. The Kursk had become not just a stricken vessel, but a symbol of helplessness in the face of the sea's indifference. Investigators would later conclude that a torpedo malfunction likely triggered the disaster. A faulty casing may have leaked fuel, igniting and detonating in the forward torpedo room. The initial blast crippled the submarine, and a second, larger explosion soon followed. In those moments, the Kursk's strength became meaningless. Its advanced design, its thick armor, its reputation as nearly invincible, all of it was shattered in the space of seconds. The submarine that had once represented modern power was reduced to wreckage on the seabed, carrying its crew of over 100 men to their deaths. Yet within that horror was an even more painful detail. Evidence suggested that not all aboard died instantly. In the aft sections, men survived for hours, perhaps even days, trapped in the darkness. They scrawled brief notes, leaving behind words for loved ones and accounts of their last moments. Their air grew thin, their lights flickered, and their strength ebbed as the sea pressed against the hull. Rescue teams above worked frantically, but difficulties with equipment and political hesitation slowed every attempt. Divers from other nations offered help, but assistance was delayed. By the time contact was finally made with the submarine, it was too late. The survivors who had clung to hope had already succumbed to the dark. Imagine the silence of those final compartments, the flicker of a single lamp overhead, the sound of water seeping through cracks, while men waited for a rescue that never arrived. The Kursk disaster was a shock not only for Russia but for the world. It was a reminder that even in an age of nuclear submarines and advanced technology, the ocean remained beyond control. The same dangers that had claimed wooden ships centuries earlier still lurked: fire, explosion, and the crushing weight of water. No level of engineering could make a vessel truly invulnerable. The sea's power was absolute, and the Kursk became proof of that in the starkest way. For the families who waited, the tragedy carried an added bitterness. Their loved ones had not been lost in battle, but in training. They had not fallen to enemies, but to the indifference of nature and the flaws of machines built by human hands. Today, the Kursk lies on the seabed as both grave and reminder. Its name has become synonymous with loss, its story told as a warning about pride, secrecy, and the enduring dangers of the deep. While the wreck itself was partially raised and studded, the aura of tragedy remains. The memory of the crew, of the failed rescues, of the silent days that passed as hope dwindled, continues to haunt the collective imagination. The Kursk disaster did not belong to history alone. It belonged to the present, showing that even the strongest vessels are only guests in the ocean's world. And as we turn from this modern tragedy, our attention drifts to waters further south, where wrecks lie older, quieter, and forgotten. Their stories written not in headlines but in whispers carried by the sea. Off the coast of Bermuda lies a stretch of sea that sailors have long regarded with a mix of respect and unease. Known as Shipwreck Alley, this region is home to hundreds of sunken vessels, each a fragment of history preserved in salt water. Unlike the sensational tales of triangles and curses, the reality here is quieter, more reflective. These ships were not swallowed by supernatural forces, but by reefs, storms, and the simple hazards of navigation. Their bones rest close together on the seafloor, forming one of the densest concentrations of wrecks in the world. For divers who visit, it feels less like an underwater graveyard of mystery and more like a silent museum, each wreck a fragile exhibit left to the currents. The geography of Bermuda played no small part in their fate. Surrounded by treacherous reefs, the island presented a hidden danger to vessels approaching its harbors. In centuries past, sailors relied on charts that were often incomplete, compasses that wavered, and visual landmarks obscured by mist. A single miscalculation could bring a ship against sharp coral, tearing open its hull in moments. Wooden frames cracked, iron plates bent, and cargo spilled into the water. In some cases, the crews managed to reach safety on shore. In others, the ocean claimed them alongside their vessels. Over time, wreck after wreck accumulated, creating a patchwork of history layered on the seabed. What makes Shipwreck Alley remarkable is not just the number of wrecks but their diversity. Here, one can find the remains of Spanish galleons, British merchant ships, American schooners, and modern freighters alike. Each carries the story of its era, the materials of its construction, and the ambitions of those who sailed it. Some are scattered timbers, barely recognizable as ships at all, while others remain strikingly intact, their masts and hulls preserved by the salt and sand. Coral has claimed many of them, wrapping steel and wood alike in living color, transforming human loss into habitats for fish and sea fans. What began as ruin becomes reef. What ended in silence becomes life once more. Divers who descend into these graveyards often speak of the stillness that greets them. The water is clear, the sunlight filtering down in beams, and in that calm, the wrecks take on an almost serene quality. Shoes rest where passengers once walked, anchors lie where they fell, and cannons from earlier centuries remain aimed toward horizons they never reached. Unlike the drama of disaster above the surface, the wrecks below speak only in silence. Their sharp edges have softened, their outlines blurred, but the impression of human endeavor is unmistakable. They are not ruins erased by time but frozen within it, holding their place in the vast conversation between man and sea. Imagine swimming gently above such a wreck, the outlines of decks visible below, your shadow drifting across planks that once creaked with life, the sea carrying it all forward in quiet procession. The atmosphere here is not one of terror but of contemplation. Shipwreck Alley does not remind us of monsters or curses, but of fragility. It shows how easily steel and timber, ambition and effort, are undone by the hidden strength of the sea. For every famous name lost here, dozens of others lie forgotten, their presence marked only by the coral that has claimed them. And yet, even in their anonymity, they speak of voyages begun with hope, journeys cut short, and stories that ended in stillness. They remain in place as if waiting, unvisited by storms, unseen by most eyes, but always present beneath the calm surface. These wrecks are a reminder that the ocean is not only vast but intimate, capable of keeping memory as well as erasing it. The ships of Shipwreck Alley linger together in quiet company, hundreds of voices reduced to silence but not erased. They endure as a meditation on time, loss, and transformation. And just beyond their shadows lie tales that are harder still to place, legends of submarines seen but never recorded, and stories of vessels that may have existed only in the whispers of those who sailed the deep. There are stories in the naval world that never appear in official records, accounts told instead in quiet conversations long after the service has ended. Retired sailors, men who spent years listening to the sea through sonar and patrolling silent waters, sometimes speak of things they were never asked to explain. Strange blips appearing on screens, shadows moving where no ship should have been, and the sensation of being followed by something that never revealed itself. These are not tales of battles or disasters, but of submarines that seem to exist only for a moment, vanishing before they could be identified. They are legends of vessels that never surface, spoken of in tones that mix curiosity with unease. In the long years of the Cold War, when oceans were crowded with patrols, such stories became more frequent. Operators listening to sonar described echoes that matched the outline of a submarine, yet no vessel was listed in the area. Attempts to track these contacts often ended in silence, as if the shape had slipped away into deeper water or dissolved into nothing. Some thought it was equipment malfunction, the sonar catching layers of current or schools of fish. Others insisted the signals were too precise, too mechanical, to be mistaken. Whatever the explanation, the encounters left an impression that not every submarine was accounted for. There are also accounts of unidentified wrecks discovered by chance. Fishermen dragging nets, or divers exploring new areas, sometimes reported the outlines of submarines resting on the seabed, their hulls rusting in silence. Yet when reported, these finds often led nowhere. No official record matched the description, and in some cases, follow-up searches failed to relocate the wrecks. Perhaps currents shifted the sand, concealing them once more, or perhaps the reports were mistaken. But the idea remains that beneath the sea lie submarines whose stories were never written down, machines that sank without recognition, their crews unnamed and their missions unknown. For sailors, such mysteries become part of the rhythm of life at sea. Many shrugged them off, chalking them up to imagination or fatigue. Others held onto them quietly, the memory resurfacing years later when asked about the strangest things they had ever encountered. Their words were not dramatic but steady, spoken like men who knew what they had seen, even if they could not prove it. These stories were passed among crews, not to frighten, but to remind one another that the ocean holds more than technology can predict. Official silence only deepened the aura of mystery, as if acknowledgement might give the legends more weight than anyone wished. Imagine the dim glow of a sonar screen in a cramped control room, a steady hum filling the air, and then a sudden echo that appears where none should be, sharp and clear, holding steady before fading into the endless noise of the ocean. The possibility of unrecorded submarines stirs questions that may never be answered. Were these secret projects, vessels launched in silence and lost before they could be admitted? Were they misidentified natural features, tricks of the deep? Or do they point to something beyond ordinary explanation, anomalies that resist classification? Without evidence, the truth remains out of reach, but the persistence of the stories suggests they cannot be dismissed entirely. The ocean is too vast, too layered with silence, for certainty to reign. These submarine legends linger precisely because they are unresolved. Unlike confirmed wrecks, studied and documented, these accounts exist only as impressions and whispers. They do not provide closure but instead leave the imagination open, restless. For those who once served beneath the waves, they are reminders that even in the most controlled environments, mystery remains. A sailor may retire, his uniform folded away, but the memory of a strange blip on a sonar screen, or the shadow of a hull where none should be, can echo for a lifetime. And as we leave behind these whispered tales, the tone shifts once more, not toward rumor or legend, but to the myths of monsters themselves, vast creatures imagined long before sonar screens existed, and feared long before submarines prowled the deep. Long before sonar or steel warships, the ocean was crossed by wooden vessels guided only by stars and instinct. For the sailors who braved those voyages, the sea was not just water and wind but a living presence, capable of rage and deceit. Out of this unease grew tales of monsters, and none more enduring than the Kraken. In hushed voices, men described a creature of impossible size, with arms like cables and eyes as wide as lanterns, capable of dragging entire ships into the deep. The Kraken was said to rise from the black water suddenly, its body vast enough to churn the sea, its limbs curling around masts and snapping them as easily as twigs. It became the embodiment of sailors' fears, the unknown given form in the shape of a beast that could not be measured or tamed. Stories of the Kraken spread across northern seas, particularly among those who fished in the cold waters around Norway and Iceland. Accounts varied, but most agreed on its enormous size. Some swore they had mistaken its back for an island, anchoring unknowingly before the mass began to move. Others claimed that whirlpools left in its wake were as deadly as the creature itself, dragging ships into spirals they could not escape. For men who lived and died on the sea, these tales carried weight not because they were proven, but because they captured the truth of how powerless a vessel could feel when the water turned against it. The Kraken was less a single monster than a symbol of the fear that traveled with every voyage into uncertain waters. Over time, natural explanations began to take shape. Sightings of giant squid, rare and terrifying in their own right, seemed to match many details of the myth. These deep-sea creatures, with their long tentacles and massive eyes, could easily inspire or when glimpsed unexpectedly. Pulled to the surface by storms or caught in nets, they offered sailors fleeting evidence that something immense lurked below. Yet even as biology offered answers, the legend of the Kraken did not fade. The squid were real, but the myth remained larger than life, growing with each retelling. To the human mind, a squid of 40 feet was impressive, but a Kraken stretching across the horizon was unforgettable. In the modern era, with cameras and submersibles probing the depths, the line between myth and reality has blurred further. Footage of giant squid gliding silently in the dark has revealed just how strange and formidable these creatures truly are. Their bodies pulse with movement, their tentacles curl and unfurl like living ropes, and their eyes gleam with an intelligence that unsettles. Watching such images, it is easy to understand how stories of monsters were born. The real creatures are not island-sized, but in the confined world of a wooden ship at night, even a brief encounter with such a being could grow into legend. The truth and the myth are not enemies. They feed each other, each keeping the other alive. Imagine sailing under a moonlit sky, the waves calm for a moment, when suddenly a shadow rises near the hull, a curling arm brushing the water's surface, and the heart tightens with the thought that something vast is moving just beneath you. The persistence of the Kraken in cultural memory shows that the ocean itself requires symbols to be understood. Sailors created monsters because they needed a language for their fear, a way to name the unease that came from living at the edge of the unknown. The Kraken filled that role perfectly, standing as both warning and explanation. Even today, when most see it as myth, the word still carries power. It conjures the same unease, the same sense of enormity beyond comprehension. The giant squid may satisfy the scientist, but the Kraken satisfies the imagination, which hungers for the extraordinary. And so the Kraken endures, not as a beast to be found, but as a presence in the mind, a reminder that some mysteries are less about what is real and more about what we cannot help but believe. And as we drift from this mythic shape, the focus turns toward another ancient image of the deep, the Leviathan, feared in scripture and story, a reminder that seas once seemed the very dwelling place of monsters. The name Leviathan rises from the pages of scripture like a shadow on the sea, a creature described in lines that blur poetry and warning. In ancient texts, it is painted as a vast serpent or dragon of the waters, unconquerable and terrifying, a reminder of forces far beyond human strength. For those who lived in coastal lands, dependent on fishing yet fearful of storms, such imagery carried weight. Leviathan was not only a monster, it was the embodiment of the ocean's unpredictability, the rage of waves, and the lurking shapes just beneath the surface. In every mention, it symbolized chaos that no spear could subdue, chaos that belonged to the depths themselves. Across centuries, the legend echoed in folklore far from the lands where it was first written. Sailors spoke of sea serpents curling through waves, of immense bodies breaking the surface, of roars that sounded like thunder. Each culture shaped Leviathan to its own fears. To some, it was a serpent coiled around the world, to others a whale-like beast capable of swallowing ships whole. The descriptions changed, but the essence remained the same. Leviathan represented something larger than man's ability to master, a living metaphor for the deep's refusal to yield. It was not only the unknown that frightened, but the sense that something within the unknown was watching. As science replaced myth in explaining the sea, Leviathan did not vanish. Instead, it adapted, lingering in the imagination as people began to encounter real creatures large enough to inspire awe. The sight of a great whale breaching the surface, its bulk dwarfing a ship's hull, echoed the grandeur once attributed to the biblical monster. The songs of these whales, mournful and resonant, carried a weight that could seem almost supernatural. Sharks of immense size, too, seemed to step into the role of Leviathan, their presence reminding sailors that predators still swam in waters that man could never truly control. Even with harpoons, even with engines, the power dynamic remained unchanged. The sea was theirs, not ours. What gives Leviathan its enduring strength is not just fear but reverence. Ancient texts did not only warn of its terror, they also marveled at its creation. It was described as part of the order of the world, terrifying but purposeful, an element of balance no man could alter. In this sense, Leviathan stands less as an enemy and more as a reminder of humility. Humanity has always sought to claim dominion over the oceans, to chart them, sail them, and exploit them. Yet the legend of Leviathan whispers that the sea will always remain untamed, that there will always be forces below the surface beyond calculation. Imagine watching from the deck of a small vessel as the dark back of a whale breaks the water at dusk, the spray rising into the fading light, and for a heartbeat feeling the same awe and trembling fear that ancient sailors once gave to the name Leviathan. Even now, in an age of satellites and sonar, the idea of Leviathan lingers. It surfaces in literature, in films, in the phrases we use when speaking of the sea. It is less about the literal creature and more about the impression it leaves. The ocean is a place where scale itself becomes overwhelming, where creatures grow beyond our sense of proportion, and where survival depends on respect. The myth still resonates because reality has not disproved it. Massive predators still glide in darkness, and the abyss still conceals forms that defy our imagination. The Leviathan of the deep waters is not bound to one story or one description. It lives wherever the ocean's vastness demands humility, wherever sailors or scientists find themselves staring into a black expanse that seems endless. It reminds us that some monsters never die because they are not creatures alone but symbols, eternal reflections of the human need to give shape to the power of the sea. And as this symbol lingers, our path carries us forward into encounters with creatures that do exist in the flesh, giants of the present, whose rarity and enormity place them firmly in the blurred space between myth and reality. Far to the south, in the cold and unforgiving waters surrounding Antarctica, there lives a creature that once belonged to the realm of rumor. The colossal squid, long whispered of by sailors who glimpsed strange forms in their nets, has emerged as one of the ocean's most extraordinary inhabitants. Unlike its more famous cousin, the giant squid, the colossal squid is even larger and stranger, built for a world of ice, darkness, and crushing pressure. It is a predator few have ever seen alive, and yet its reality is undeniable. Caught on rare occasions by fishing vessels or recorded fleetingly by cameras, it confirms that the ocean still shelters forms of life that surpass expectation. The first clear evidence of colossal squid came not from direct observation, but from fragments hauled up in nets. Fishermen working the southern seas found massive tentacles sliced by accident, their hooks embedded in prey that had been attacked by something far greater. Beaks of impossible size were recovered, larger than any known from the giant squid. From these pieces, scientists began to reconstruct an image of a predator that could grow longer than a bus, with eyes the size of dinner plates, and hooks on its tentacles to grasp struggling fish. The scale was staggering, and yet for decades no living specimen was witnessed directly. The animal seemed to remain hidden, a phantom of the polar deep. That began to change in the early 2000s, when entire specimens were accidentally caught in the nets of fishing vessels working in Antarctic waters. One weighed close to half a ton, its arms stretched across the deck like thick ropes, its body pulsing with fading life. The discovery electrified both scientists and the public. Here, at last, was proof beyond doubt. Images of the animal spread quickly, showing not a monster of legend but a creature perfectly adapted to its environment. With a mantle built for cold waters, a metabolism suited to the slow pace of the deep, and tentacles lined with swiveling hooks, it embodied efficiency as much as awe. Yet even with these rare encounters, much remains uncertain. The colossal squid is thought to inhabit depths beyond ordinary reach, where light never penetrates and temperatures hover near freezing. Its behavior is largely unknown. Some speculate that it is an ambush predator, drifting motionless until prey wanders close. Others believe it is more active, pursuing fish and smaller squid with sudden bursts of speed. The few stomachs that have been examined tell a story of a hunter focused on large Antarctic toothfish, creatures themselves formidable. In this icy ecosystem, predator meets predator, and the colossal squid sits at the top of the chain. Imagine a camera drifting through black water near Antarctica, the beam of its light catching the pale flash of an eye larger than a human head, the faint pulse of movement before the shape slips back into shadow. Footage captured in recent years has confirmed only glimpses. Grainy recordings show outlines, blurred shapes retreating into the dark, enough to prove presence but not enough to reveal the whole. It is as if the animal itself resists observation, appearing just long enough to remind us of its enormity before vanishing again. Each sighting is treasured, each recovered specimen studied with care, but the larger picture remains incomplete. For every question answered, another rises. How many exist? How far do they roam? What secrets of survival do they hold in their immense bodies? The fascination with colossal squid lies not only in their size but in the way they bridge myth and reality. They are proof that creatures once relegated to the world of sailors' fear truly exist. Yet they retain enough mystery to keep imaginations alive. To know they dwell in the Antarctic deep is to acknowledge how much of the ocean remains beyond us. We are granted only fragments, tentacles, beaks, blurry footage, while the full presence of the animal continues to belong to the sea itself. And as our focus lingers on these giants of the cold, it leads us naturally to the next set of legends. The long serpents of the waves, the twisting forms that sailors once swore could circle entire ships. For as long as humans have sailed open waters, stories of serpents rising from the sea have wound themselves into maritime lore. Descriptions of long, twisting bodies gliding just below the surface, crests breaking the water like rolling hills, and sudden appearances of snake-like forms stretching across the waves have been passed from one generation to the next. To the men aboard wooden ships, already made small by distance and horizon, such encounters seemed undeniable. They wrote of creatures as thick as masts, as long as the vessel itself, some with manes and others with gleaming scales. The serpent became a constant companion in the imagination of seafarers, an explanation for the shadows that moved in waters too vast to fully know. Reports of sea serpents were especially common in the 18th and 19th centuries, when global exploration was accelerating and ships traveled routes that were still poorly charted. Sailors in the North Atlantic, the Mediterranean, and the Pacific described sudden sightings that often lasted only minutes before the creature slipped beneath the surface. Some accounts spoke of hissing sounds and the slap of coils against the water. Others described heads lifting above the waves, jaws open as if to breathe or roar. These tales filled journals and newspapers, igniting curiosity and sometimes fear among readers on land who imagined entire oceans filled with monstrous serpents waiting to strike. Modern explanations point to creatures already known to science. The oarfish, with its ribbon-like body stretching more than 30 feet, is often cited as a likely source. Rarely seen alive, it sometimes drifts to the surface, its silver body shimmering in the sun and its crimson fin undulating in the water, giving the impression of a mythical serpent. Large whales, particularly when traveling in lines, can also create the illusion of a single long body. The rise and fall of their backs in sequence, viewed from a distance, might easily be misinterpreted. Schools of dolphins or the wake of unseen currents may have added to the confusion. Yet even with these explanations, the sheer persistence of serpent sightings resists complete dismissal. Not all accounts can be so neatly explained. Some sailors, trusted for their discipline and experience, swore to what they had seen, insisting it was no fish, no whale, but something altogether different. These stories, told with conviction, gave weight to the legend and ensured its survival. Scientists of earlier centuries sometimes entertained the possibility of undiscovered marine reptiles, survivors from prehistoric ages that had somehow endured in the deep. Though such theories have faded with time, the appeal of the unknown remains. The ocean's immensity leaves room for speculation, and in that room, serpents continue to live. Imagine a calm sea at dawn, the horizon painted with pale light, when suddenly a long, sinuous body surfaces beside a ship, gliding silently for a few moments before sinking back into the depths, leaving only ripples to suggest it was ever there. These fleeting encounters play on the edges of memory, where fear and wonder mingle. For many, the serpent is less a zoological puzzle than a symbol of mystery itself. It stands for the unseen forces beneath the waves, the feeling that something vast moves below, just out of sight. The fascination endures not because proof has been found, but because proof has not been possible. The absence of certainty allows the imagination to flourish, and every rare sighting of an oarfish or unfamiliar shadow renews the legend. The serpent becomes a vessel for our own unease, a reminder that the ocean is not entirely ours to measure. Today, sea serpents live on in art, literature, and the stories divers tell when they glimpse something long and strange slipping through the water. They are not part of official taxonomy, but they are firmly part of the cultural memory of the sea. Each report, whether mistaken or true, adds another thread to a tapestry that stretches back centuries. And as long as the ocean remains vast and only partly known, the tales will continue. For every rational explanation, there will always be a lingering thought. What if the serpents are still out there, rising quietly from the deep when no one is watching? And it is with that question that we turn to the great predators we know exist beyond doubt. Creatures whose size and power rival the imagination of any myth, and whose presence in the sea has shaped fear and awe across generations. In the centuries before engines and steel hulls, the ocean was crossed in wooden ships powered only by wind and muscle. Among the greatest dangers faced by these vessels were not storms or reefs, but the whales themselves. To early whalers, sperm whales and right whales were not just quarry but terrifying adversaries. They were immense, intelligent creatures, capable of destroying boats with a single strike of their tails or dragging crews into the depths when harpoons held fast. In an age when the sea already seemed alive with dangers, the whale became a monster as real as any serpent, a living embodiment of the deep's untamed power. The sperm whale, in particular, struck fear into sailors. Its massive head and jaws, filled with teeth as long as a man's hand, inspired awe even before the hunt began. When harpooned, it often responded with ferocity, lashing out at boats that circled it. Tales spread of entire crews being tossed into the air, boats splintered in an instant, and men vanishing beneath the waves. The sheer bulk of the whale made it seem less like an animal and more like a moving island, an opponent no human craft was truly equipped to conquer. Whalers spoke of it in tones of respect as much as dread, knowing that a single misstep could mean death. Right whales, though less aggressive, carried their own terrors. Their immense size and the effort required to bring them down often ended in disaster. Harpoons and ropes tangled around boats, dragging men underwater as the whale thrashed in its final struggle. Survivors told of being pulled deep into blackness, the pressure crushing and the light vanishing before ropes snapped or knives freed them. These near-death experiences gave rise to stories of whales as vengeful spirits of the sea, determined to take their hunters with them. Folklore blurred with fact, and every new voyage carried the weight of those old tales. The most famous of these encounters eventually found its way into literature. Stories of whales turning the hunt on their pursuers inspired some of the most enduring myths of the ocean, where the animal was cast not as prey but as nemesis. The whale became Leviathan reborn, a beast of biblical scale rising to test human pride. To stand in a fragile boat, spear in hand, facing a creature 10 times the length of the vessel, was to feel the full imbalance between man and sea. Victory brought wealth, but failure was catastrophic. For every successful hunt recorded in ship logs, there were also entries of boats destroyed, men lost, and hunts abandoned in fear. Imagine the sudden silence after a whale strikes a boat, the wood cracking, the water boiling with foam, and then the eerie stillness as the survivors cling to wreckage, waiting for the creature to surface again. Over time, the fear diminished as technology advanced. Explosive harpoons, faster ships, and eventually industrial whaling fleets tipped the balance decisively in humanity's favor. Yet even then, a shadow of the old order remained. Whales continued to breach near ships, their immense bodies defying belief, their power undeniable. The stories told by ancestors lingered in memory, shaping how people viewed these giants long after the hunts had ended. They were no longer seen only as monsters, but the impression of danger was never forgotten. Today, whales are admired rather than feared, protected rather than pursued. Yet the echoes of their monstrous past endure in folklore, songs, and the language of the sea. They remain reminders that humanity's relationship with the ocean has always been fragile, marked by encounters with creatures that could not be controlled. To the men who faced them centuries ago, whales were not simply animals but forces of nature, unpredictable and overwhelming. And as we turn from these giants of flesh and bone, our gaze drifts back further still, toward shadows of creatures that no longer swim. Beasts that once dominated the seas in ages long before men built ships, and whose absence is felt only in the echoes of their legends. Long before humans crossed oceans in ships, the seas belonged to predators of unimaginable size. Among them was Megalodon, the giant shark that reigned millions of years ago, leaving behind teeth the size of a human hand and jaws wide enough to swallow prey whole. To picture such a creature gliding silently through ancient waters is to glimpse a reality that feels closer to myth than science. Fossil evidence tells us it existed, that it hunted whales and massive fish with terrifying efficiency, and that it ruled the seas for millions of years. Its absence now is certain, yet its shadow lingers, whispered of whenever an enormous fin or a dark shape appears where none should be. The remains of megalodon are most often found in teeth, scattered across seabeds and cliffs. Their serrated edges speak of power, their size of dominance. Unlike bones, which decay quickly, these teeth endure, surfacing in riverbeds, beaches, and ocean excavations. They are reminders that the seas once carried a predator far beyond the scale of today's great white sharks. Estimates suggest lengths of 50 to 60 feet, with a bite force strong enough to crush bone with ease. Scientists conclude that such a giant could not survive in today's colder oceans, that changes in climate and prey drove it to extinction. Yet the human imagination resists the certainty of endings. The vastness of the ocean leaves room for speculation, and speculation keeps the legend alive. Modern sightings add fuel to the persistence of the myth. Fishermen speak of massive shadows beneath their boats, too large to match any known species. Divers tell of moments when water darkened around them as if something immense had passed just beyond sight. Photographs surface from time to time, blurry and indistinct, hinting at fins or tails of improbable size. Most are dismissed as exaggerations, tricks of light, or misidentified whales. But the very act of dismissal strengthens the allure. If proof is lacking, so too is disproof in the minds of those who want to believe. And belief, especially where fear and/or overlap, is difficult to extinguish. The ocean encourages such stories because it is too vast to fully know. Even now, great stretches of the deep remain unmapped, trenches unexplored, ecosystems unseen. In such places, the idea of survival seems plausible. Could a small population of giants still glide through those depths, unseen by modern science? Rational voices answer no, pointing to the impossibility of such creatures remaining undetected, their need for food far beyond what the deep could provide. Yet the question is never silenced completely. It lingers, fueled by the sheer scale of the unknown. Megalodon may be gone, but its myth thrives precisely because the sea itself is so much larger than certainty. Imagine standing on the deck of a boat in calm waters, looking down into the blue, when suddenly the thought crosses your mind that something vast could be moving far beneath, hidden but present, as real as the silence pressing against your ears. The endurance of megalodon in culture is not only about fear but also about nostalgia. It connects us to a time when the seas were wilder, when evolution produced giants without restraint. To imagine it still out there is to imagine that the ocean has not lost all its mysteries, that something primeval continues to swim in darkness. The fossil teeth sold in markets or displayed in museums carry that same echo, both evidence of the past and suggestions of the possible. They are objects of science, but they are also talismans of wonder, drawing us back into questions larger than ourselves. And so, Megalodon's shadow remains, not in flesh but in imagination. It is a story retold in documentaries, novels, and whispered conversations on quiet decks. The shark itself is gone, but the fear it inspired has never left the human mind. We may no longer sail in fear of its jaws, but its legend swims alongside us still, as persistent as the waves, as enduring as the mysteries we will always find in the deep. And from these vanished giants of prehistory, our gaze turns to the strange and living creatures of the abyss, beings that twist and glow in ways that seem no less fantastic, born not of myth but of survival in a world without light. Far below the reach of sunlight, in waters where pressure crushes and temperatures fall near freezing, live creatures whose shapes seem closer to dreams than to familiar life. They are fish, yet they look like nothing most people would recognize. Their bodies are stretched, twisted, and adapted in ways that make sense only in the dark. Among them are gulper eels, anglerfish, and countless others that have turned survival into something strange, almost grotesque, and undeniably fascinating. They are not monsters in the sense of myth, yet to look upon them is to feel the same awe, the same shiver of unease, that stories of sea beasts once inspired. These are the true residents of the abyss, and their forms reveal how life bends to fit even the harshest places. The gulper eel is perhaps the most unsettling. Its body is long and ribbon-like, ending in a tail that glows faintly with light to lure prey. But it is the head that captures attention, a massive mouth, hinged and expandable, capable of swallowing creatures almost as large as itself. In the black silence of the deep, where meals are rare, the gulper eel cannot afford to be selective. Anything that wanders close enough may vanish into its vast jaws, folded into a stomach built to stretch. Its silhouette drifting in the water is eerie, its head disproportionate to its thin body, its pale glow trailing behind it like a ghostly lantern. For sailors of past centuries, had they seen such a thing rise unexpectedly, it might have been enough to feed stories of serpents and devourers. The anglerfish, too, thrives on strangeness. Its body is squat, its teeth needle-thin and curved inward, ensuring that once prey enters its mouth, escape is impossible. But what sets it apart is the luminous lure that dangles above its head, a glowing filament swaying like a tiny star in the dark. Smaller fish, drawn to the light, drift closer, only to be engulfed in sudden jaws. The anglerfish is a portrait of deception, a reminder that survival in the abyss requires cunning as much as strength. Its appearance is unsettling not because it is violent, but because it is so perfectly adapted to a world of hunger and shadow. Other creatures carry their own bizarre adaptations. The viperfish, with fangs so large they cannot fit inside its mouth, swims with a body lined with glowing spots, like stars scattered across its flanks. The barrel-eye fish has a transparent head, its eyes staring upward through a clear dome to catch faint traces of light above. The hatchetfish glimmers with mirrored scales, blending into the faintest glows from the surface. Each species, examined in isolation, seems almost implausible. Together, they reveal an ecosystem shaped by pressures unimaginable, where every adaptation is the difference between life and death. Imagine drifting weightless in that blackness, your light falling suddenly on a wide-jawed gulper eel or a sharp-fanged viperfish, their movements slow, deliberate, and alien in every detail. The eeriness of these creatures lies in their familiarity mixed with distortion. They are fish, yet their forms stretch the definition until it feels as though something otherworldly has crept into our seas. They remind us that the deep is not a place for comfort or beauty but for survival, and survival shapes life into whatever form is required. Where light is absent, eyes grow enormous or vanish entirely. Where food is scarce, mouths grow vast, stomachs stretch, and bodies thin to conserve energy. Where predators hunt invisibly, bioluminescence becomes both shield and trap. Each adaptation tells a story not of monstrosity, but of resilience against the most inhospitable conditions Earth has to offer. And yet, for all their strangeness, there is beauty in them too. The flicker of a lure in the dark, the ghostly trail of light from a tail, the shimmering transparency of delicate bodies. They create a world as wondrous as it is eerie. These fish are reminders that life does not stop at the edge of comfort. It thrives in silence, in pressure, in absence. They are the true monsters of the abyss, not because they threaten us, but because they show us how far life will go to endure. And as we leave them behind, our attention shifts toward another myth made real. The legends of octopuses so immense they seemed capable of dragging ships beneath the waves, creatures that may yet have counterparts hidden in the vastness of the sea. For centuries, stories of enormous octopuses have clung to the imagination of those who worked the sea. Sailors told of tentacles rising suddenly from the depths, curling around the sides of ships and dragging them into the water. They spoke of suction cups the size of shields, of eyes glowing in the dark, and of creatures so immense that even the largest vessels trembled beneath their grasp. These tales passed from mouth to mouth in port taverns and along wharves, gaining size and drama with each telling. The ocean's mystery allowed such stories to flourish, for who could prove what truly moved in the black water beneath the keel at night? Accounts of giant octopus attacks were never common, yet they were persistent. Some spoke of smaller boats overturned in an instant, fishermen snatched from decks, or divers who felt a sudden grip pulling them down. In most cases, the stories cannot be verified, and scientific evidence remains scarce. The largest known octopuses, such as the Pacific giant, grow to impressive size but not to the monstrous proportions described in legend. Still, the possibility that larger, undiscovered species could exist in the abyss has been enough to keep the myth alive. The octopus is a master of elusiveness, capable of vanishing into cracks, changing color, and moving with a silence that makes it seem more spirit than flesh. In many ways, the octopus is the perfect candidate for legend. Its body is boneless, fluid, able to squeeze through impossibly small gaps. Its arms, lined with powerful suckers, move independently, creating the impression of many creatures rather than one. Its intelligence is undeniable. It learns, remembers, and solves problems in ways that unsettle those who study it. To imagine such a being at many times its known size is to imagine something both alien and alarmingly possible. The absence of evidence is almost irrelevant when the mind considers how easily such a creature could conceal itself in the deep, beyond reach of light and exploration. Divers who have encountered octopuses, even of normal size, often describe the experience as eerie. A sudden arm wrapping around a leg, the pull firm and unyielding, is enough to stir panic. The animal's eyes, unblinking and calculating, add to the impression of intelligence that borders on unsettling. When these encounters are magnified in retelling, they take on mythic proportions. A diver might escape from a grasp only to imagine how much worse it would have been had the creature been 10 times larger. In this way, personal encounters feed into the larger myth, shaping it with kernels of truth and layers of imagination. Imagine swimming through dim waters, the sand shifting below, when a shadow drifts across your path and an arm brushes your shoulder, curling lightly before slipping away into the dark. Stories of giant octopuses also blend with older legends of sea monsters. Some kraken tales, once thought to describe squid, may have drawn equally from octopus encounters. Ships disabled by mysterious entanglements, nets shredded without warning, or sudden whirlpools dragging vessels down were sometimes blamed on creatures with many arms. The octopus, unlike the serpent or shark, seemed to embody cunning rather than brute force. Its attacks were imagined as deliberate, as though it plotted against those who intruded into its world. This quality of intent made the myth even more unsettling, giving the impression of an adversary not just of size, but of mind. Modern science has never confirmed an octopus of legendary proportions, but neither has it stripped the stories of their power. The ocean's scale ensures that possibilities linger, and the intelligence of known species makes larger, stranger kin seem plausible. To this day, the giant octopus survives in folklore, in novels, in the quiet fears of divers and sailors alike. Its image is enough: the curling arm, the unblinking eye, the sudden grip from nowhere. These are details too vivid to fade, and so they remain, settled deep in memory. The legends of the giant octopus may never be proven, but they continue to shape how we see the sea. They remind us that unease does not require evidence, only imagination. And with these shadows lingering in thought, we turn toward the ocean's deepest places, where darkness itself becomes a kind of creature, and where life adapts in ways stranger than any myth. There is a place on Earth where the sea falls away farther than anywhere else, a vast wound in the crust that plunges deeper than the highest mountains rise. The Mariana Trench stretches for more than 1,000 miles across the Pacific, but its most famous point is Challenger Deep, where the seafloor lies nearly 7 miles beneath the surface. To look at such numbers on paper is one thing, to imagine them in physical reality is another. If Mount Everest were placed at the bottom of this trench, its summit would still be drowned beneath a mile of water. It is the most extreme environment our planet offers outside of space itself, a place of perpetual night and unrelenting pressure where only the most unusual forms of life can exist. The descent into the trench begins with a sense of scale that quickly slips beyond comprehension. At the surface, light sparkles across waves as it does anywhere else in the Pacific. But as a vessel lowers, brightness fades in gradual steps. First, the sunlight weakens into twilight, then vanishes entirely, replaced by a darkness so complete it feels tangible. By the time one is miles down, the pressure outside is thousands of times greater than at the surface, enough to crush steel if not engineered perfectly. The silence is absolute, broken only by the hum of machinery inside the submersible. For those few humans who have made the journey, the experience is described less as travel and more as entering another world. The organisms that live here are shaped by conditions impossible anywhere else. Tiny amphipods, shrimp-like creatures with translucent bodies, crawl across the silt. Microbes feed on chemicals seeping from the crust, building entire ecosystems without the aid of sunlight. Some fish with pale, jello-like bodies have been observed at extreme depths, their flesh so soft it would collapse under lesser pressures but perfectly suited to the weight of water pressing upon them. Life here is fragile in appearance, yet strong in endurance, surviving where most would assume nothing could live at all. They are reminders that evolution bends itself to fit even the harshest spaces. Technology has allowed only glimpses of this world. Cameras lowered into Challenger Deep show shifting sediments, ghostly forms moving across the lens, and sometimes glowing flecks that hint at bioluminescence even in this abyss. Each expedition brings back fragments rather than full portraits, as if the trench allows only brief glimpses of its secrets before retreating again into silence. The difficulty of reaching such depths ensures that mystery remains. Only a handful of descents have ever been made, each one a monumental undertaking, each one confirming both the harshness and the wonder of what lies below. Imagine sitting inside a small vessel at those depths, peering through a thick window into pitch darkness, when suddenly a pale creature drifts into view, its body unfamiliar and delicate, a fleeting reminder that life finds a way even here. The trench holds not only biological fascination but also a certain symbolic weight. It is the deepest place on Earth, a reminder of how little we truly command of our planet. We map the surface of the moon with greater precision than the floor of this chasm. Its pressure, its cold, and its remoteness make it one of the last frontiers, a space of both science and imagination. To descend here is to confront the limits of human reach, to acknowledge that for all our technology, we remain fragile guests in a realm that resists our presence. The Mariana Trench is beyond imagination not because it is empty, but because it contains a fullness of mystery. Every discovery points to more questions, every image to more possibilities. It is not a void, but a canvas of life and silence painted in forms we can barely comprehend. And as our gaze lingers at these extreme depths, the light of bioluminescence flickers across the darkness, guiding us into a realm where creatures carry their own stars within them, glowing softly as they drift through endless night. In the blackness of the deep, where sunlight never reaches, life has learned to make its own light. Bioluminescence is one of the ocean's quiet wonders, a natural glow produced not by fire or electricity but by chemical reactions within living bodies. To those who witness it, the effect is otherworldly. Tiny sparks drift through the water like stars scattered across a night sky. Larger glows pulse rhythmically, fading and returning in slow patterns. Some flashes come suddenly, startling in their brilliance before vanishing as quickly as they appeared. In a place defined by darkness, these creatures carry lanterns within themselves, transforming the abyss into a shifting constellation. Lanternfish are among the most common makers of light. They move in vast schools that stretch for miles, their bodies lined with photophores that shimmer as they swim. When disturbed, they flash brightly, confusing predators and blending with the faint glow of moonlight filtering down from above. To see them from a submersible is to feel as though one is drifting among galaxies, their collective light a silent chorus of survival. Other fish use their light more deliberately. Some have lures that dangle before their mouths, glowing like bait to attract unsuspecting prey. Others flash signals to communicate, patterns understood only by those of their own kind. Jellyfish offer some of the most mesmerizing displays. Their bells pulse with radiance, sending waves of blue and green rippling outward through the water. Certain species create trails of light when touched, glowing in defense to confuse would-be predators. A swarm of such jellyfish drifting together becomes a slow-moving light show, filling the darkness with silent fireworks. Even the smallest among them, barely visible to the human eye, add to the effect. Microscopic plankton are capable of sudden bursts of light, and when billions gather, entire waves at the surface glow with every crest and break. Sailors throughout history have marveled at these glowing seas, their ships cutting glowing wakes through the night. Shrimp and other crustaceans add their own contributions. Some shoot bursts of glowing fluid into the water like underwater flares, startling attackers long enough to escape. Others glow faintly along their bodies, their light serving as camouflage against the faint shimmer filtering from the surface far above. The adaptations are endless, each a quiet refinement of survival. The ocean is a place where energy is precious, and to give light freely is costly. Yet these creatures have mastered its use, turning the gift of glow into a language of both life and defense. Imagine floating in the still darkness, your light switched off, and watching as the water around you begins to twinkle with its own stars, drifting slowly, pulsing gently, as if the night sky has sunk into the sea. The beauty of bioluminescence is inseparable from its mystery. Scientists understand the chemical reactions that create the light, yet the sheer diversity of its use continues to surprise. Some creatures glow constantly, others only when disturbed. Some emit blue light, the color that travels farthest in water, while others create reds or greens that seem almost unnatural in the abyss. The deeper researchers look, the more variations they discover, each hinting at lives adapted in ways still barely understood. The abyss is far from empty. It is alive with signals, messages, and disguises written in light. To the human eye, these glows inspire calm and awe. They soften the terror of the deep, replacing it with wonder. But they also remind us that survival here is always uncertain. Every spark of light is a strategy, every shimmer a response to danger or hunger. The ocean's stars are not for beauty alone but for survival. And as we drift away from their glowing fields, the focus shifts to another kind of mystery. Not light but sound. The strange noises recorded in the depths that science still struggles to explain. In the silence of the ocean's depths, sound carries farther than sight. It travels through water with remarkable efficiency, reaching across hundreds of miles in ways light never could. For decades, scientists have placed hydrophones, underwater microphones, throughout the seas to study whales, submarines, and seismic activity. In doing so, they have also recorded noises that resist easy explanation. These sounds, catalogued with names like Bloop and Julia, have entered the lore of ocean mysteries, standing as reminders that even with modern technology, The sea still speaks in voices we do not fully understand. They are fragments of communication or disturbance, hints of something vast moving beneath the surface, captured only as echoes. The calm lesson of the hydrothermal vents is that the ocean contains secrets beyond imagination. It is not only a place of wrecks and myths, but of living systems that challenge our most basic assumptions. The creatures that thrive here remind us that survival takes many forms, and that life finds a way even in the most extreme conditions. From these vents rises not just heat but possibility, pointing toward mysteries yet deeper, where the boundaries of the known world blur into realms we can only begin to picture. And as we leave these alien landscapes behind, we turn toward the wreckage of fleets lost to storms and battle, where history itself sleeps on the seabed. In 2011, a team of Swedish treasure hunters scanning the floor of the Baltic Sea with sonar came across something unexpected. Their instruments showed the outline of a large, circular structure resting more than 250 feet beneath the surface. At first glance, it appeared too regular, too geometric, to be a simple boulder or outcrop. Headlines soon dubbed it the Baltic Sea anomaly, and speculation spread quickly. Was it a natural formation shaped by glacier, or something artificial, the remains of an ancient construction or even a craft not of this world? More than a decade later, the object still resists easy explanation, lying silent beneath the cold waters and layers of silt. The sonar images revealed what looked like a disc, nearly 200 feet in diameter, with edges that seemed unnaturally sharp. Some interpretations suggested stair-like features or straight lines running across its surface, shapes that nature rarely produces. Nearby, tracks or ridges appeared to lead toward the object, as if it had slid into place or left a trail behind. To the eyes of those hoping for discovery, the images looked strikingly intentional. To others, they were simply sonar distortions, artifacts created by the limitations of the equipment. The debate began almost immediately, and it has never fully quieted. Scientists who examined the findings leaned toward natural explanations. The Baltic Sea is full of glacial deposits left from the last ice age, boulders and ridges carved by ice sheets and scattered across the seafloor. Many argued that the anomaly was nothing more than one of these deposits, its unusual shape exaggerated by sonar imaging. Rock samples later taken from the site seemed to support this view, pointing to common minerals consistent with natural origins. Yet these explanations did not erase the fascination. The human eye is drawn to patterns, and in the patterns of the sonar scans, many saw something more than chance. For the divers who visited the site, the impressions were mixed. Some described the object as clearly shaped, with features that suggested intentional design. Others saw only a large rock formation, remarkable mainly for the attention it had received. Visibility in the Baltic is often poor, the water murky and the light scarce, making it difficult to capture definitive images. Photographs and videos released to the public showed vague outlines, enough to intrigue but not enough to prove. The mystery remained suspended, caught between evidence too slight for certainty and imagination eager to fill the gaps. Theories multiplied. Some claimed the object was the remnant of an ancient civilization, a stone structure lost beneath rising seas. Others proposed it was a Nazi-built device, left behind from the Second World War and long forgotten. A more extravagant idea suggested it was the wreckage of a spacecraft, a disc-shaped craft that had come to rest on the seafloor. Each theory carried its own allure, none carried proof. The Baltic Sea anomaly became less a discovery than a canvas for speculation, a place where natural science and human wonder collided without resolution. Imagine descending into those cold northern waters, the greenish light fading as you approach the seafloor, your torch falling across the faint outline of a massive shape, edges disappearing into the gloom, leaving you uncertain whether you are looking at rock or something designed. In the years since, the anomaly has become a fixture in discussions of underwater mysteries. Scientists continue to suggest it is a natural formation, shaped by glacier and erosion. Believers continue to argue that its geometry and scale demand another explanation. The truth lies beneath layers of silt and darkness, waiting for clearer investigation. But the cost and difficulty of such work mean answers may never come. And so it rests there still, silent and unresolved, more symbol than sight, reminding us how little of the seafloor has been mapped or understood. The Baltic Sea anomaly remains important not for what it proves, but for what it represents, the persistent tension between what we know and what we imagine. It shows how quickly a shadow on a sonar screen can become a legend, and how the ocean, with all its silence, is fertile ground for unease. And as we leave this strange formation behind, the journey carries us toward another kind of wreck, one not disputed, but tragically real, where an entire fleet was lost to waves and storm, never to return. Off the coast of Yonaguni, a small island at the far edge of Japan's Ryukyu chain, lies one of the most puzzling underwater sites ever discovered. Divers exploring the seabed in the 1980s came across what appeared to be vast terraces of stone, stacked in layers and carved into sharp, geometric forms. Steps, platforms, and what looked like walls seemed to rise from the sand, stretching for hundreds of feet. At first glance, it looked unmistakably like a monument, a sunken temple, or the remains of a lost city. But the more it was studied, the less certain the answer became. Was this the work of nature, or of human hands long forgotten? The structure itself is immense, with broad, flat surfaces and near-vertical faces that resemble masonry. Divers described swimming alongside staircases that appear too regular to be random, with right angles that give the impression of deliberate design. Some claim to see the outlines of roads, courtyards, or even a stage-like area. Photographs show clean lines and sharp edges, so unlike the rounded forms typical of natural rock. To many, these features point unmistakably to human construction, evidence of a culture predating recorded history, one capable of engineering on a massive scale before vanishing beneath the waves. Supporters of the artificial theory suggest that Yonaguni may be a relic of a lost civilization, one that thrived thousands of years ago when sea levels were lower. As glacier melted at the end of the last ice age, they argue, rising waters could have swallowed coastal settlements, leaving only submerged ruins behind. In this view, the Yonaguni monument becomes more than an oddity. It becomes a signpost pointing toward forgotten chapters of human history. Some enthusiasts even link it to broader myths of Lemuria, Mu, or other drowned continents whispered of in legend. The sheer size of the formation, combined with the striking geometry, fuels speculation that it cannot be explained by geology alone. Yet many scientists remain unconvinced. Geologists argue that Yonaguni's features are the natural result of sandstone fracturing along fault lines. The island lies in a region prone to earthquakes, and the constant stress on the seabed can break rock into straight, angular formations. In this interpretation, the terraces are not steps, but natural ledges created as softer layers eroded away. What looks like walls and roads are simply the coincidental alignments of cracks and planes in the stone. Nature, they remind us, is often capable of producing patterns that mimic human design, especially in places where erosion and tectonics work together over millennia. The debate is sharpened by the difficulty of proof. Divers capture images and videos, but murky water and shifting light make interpretation difficult. A line that looks perfectly carved in one photograph may appear jagged and irregular in another. Without inscriptions, artifacts, or tools found in association with the site, there is little to confirm human involvement. Excavation is impossible at such depths, leaving the structure suspended in ambiguity. To some, this uncertainty is itself the most compelling part of the story. The monument seems to balance on the line between fact and imagination, as if it were designed to resist any single conclusion. Imagine swimming slowly along one of its ledges, your light falling across a staircase that rises step by step into the shadows, and feeling the hesitation of not knowing whether you are gliding over the bones of geology or the ruins of history. Over the decades, the Yonaguni monument has become a symbol of how the sea guards its secrets. It is large enough to inspire awe, clear enough to suggest possibility, yet ambiguous enough to prevent certainty. For some, it is an ancient temple drowned by time. For others, it is sandstone shaped by fault lines. For all, it is a reminder that the ocean hides places that remain unresolved, places where science and myth meet in uneasy balance. And as we move on from this debate, our attention shifts to other waters where entire fleets, not just single structures, were claimed by storms and battle, their wreckage lying scattered in silence below. In the history of deep-sea exploration, there are creatures that appeared only once, caught by chance or glimpsed briefly, and then vanished from record. They are sometimes found in the nets of trawlers, sometimes in the path of submersible cameras, sometimes floating lifeless at the surface after being brought up from depths too great for survival. Scientists record them carefully, sketch their features, and preserve what they can. Yet despite years of searching, those exact forms never appear again. These one-time species are reminders that the ocean is vast beyond measure, and that what we know of it is only the faintest outline. One of the most haunting aspects of these rare finds is how ordinary they sometimes look at first glance. A fish caught in the deep nets might have a familiar shape, fins, scales, a tail, but some feature makes it unlike any other known species. Perhaps its jaws are shaped unusually, or its fins arranged in a way that matches no existing family. A shrimp-like creature may appear translucent, with appendages arranged in patterns not seen before. Once examined and catalogued, they are given names, added to records, and then left to linger as question marks. No follow-up catches confirm them. No second sighting proves they endure. They remain single entries in the long list of marine life. For fishermen and explorers, such encounters feel like moments of wonder. A single net can haul up dozens of ordinary specimens, and then, among them, one creature utterly strange. Its eyes might glow unusually, its body stretched beyond expectation, or its colors too vivid for the shadows it came from. These are not monsters in the traditional sense, but they carry the same aura, beings that defy familiarity. And the fact that they vanish so completely afterward suggests the sea is filled with far more variety than our brief windows of exploration allow us to see. Sometimes these single sightings come not from nets but from cameras. A passing shadow caught in a submersible's light, a flicker of a body that slides across the frame before retreating into darkness. Researchers may replay the footage endlessly, debating whether it shows a known species or something altogether different. The camera provides proof, but never enough. Without a second encounter, the image becomes part of a growing catalogue of possibilities, each one suspended in uncertainty. Was it real? Was it unique? Or does it simply elude us, living in corners too rarely visited? Imagine watching a monitor in the cramped cabin of a submersible, when suddenly a strange fish drifts into the light, its fins splayed like wings, its body shimmering in colors that seem unreal, before slipping away into the black, never to be seen again. These one-time species remind us how incomplete our knowledge truly is. The ocean covers more than 2/3 of the planet, and most of its depths remain unexplored. In such immensity, the idea that we might have encountered only a fraction of what exists is not surprising. The real surprise is that we encounter new forms at all, given how rarely we reach the places they live. The silence that follows such discoveries is not proof of absence but a reflection of how difficult it is to return to the same exact point in the endless sea. For scientists, these finds raise difficult questions. Should a species be defined by a single specimen? How do we understand its place in the ecosystem when we cannot observe its behavior, its diet, its reproduction? Some argue that many of these species may simply be unusual individuals, mutations, or variations of known animals. Others hold that the ocean hides entire lineages we have barely touched, lineages that only reveal themselves in fleeting glimpses. Without repeated encounters, certainty remains elusive, but the intrigue grows. The creatures found only once hold a quiet power in their rarity. They are not spectacles of size or threat, but whispers of diversity hidden in darkness. They remind us that for every known fish, shrimp, or jelly, there may be dozens more unseen, unclassified, unnamed. The ocean offers hints, then closes again, leaving behind only fragments and memories. And as we drift from these fleeting apparitions, we turn next toward tragedies not of biology but of history, to fleets of ships lost together in storms and battles, leaving wreckage that tells its own story of silence beneath the waves. Far beneath the restless surface, past the slopes of continents and the jagged ridges of mountains, lie the abyssal plains. They stretch for thousands of miles across the seafloor, broad and almost featureless, the quietest landscapes on Earth. At depths of 2 to 4 miles, these plains are cloaked in darkness, pressed by immense weight, and swept by slow currents that carry the dust of continents out into the deep. To imagine them is to picture an infinite stillness, a world where change is measured not in hours or years but in millennia. They are deserts of the sea, yet not empty, quiet stages where strange organisms endure in ways as steady and patient as the plains themselves. The surface of the abyssal plains is covered in fine sediment, a rain of particles that drifts downward from the life above. Tiny fragments of shells, organic matter, and minerals fall constantly, settling into a soft blanket over the seafloor. This marine snow is sparse, but it is enough to sustain the creatures that dwell there. Starfish spread themselves across the silt, brittle stars coil delicately, and sea cucumbers crawl slowly, feeding on the thin layer of nourishment. Each organism seems adapted to the pace of the place, slow, deliberate, conserving every bit of energy. Life here does not flourish in abundance, but it persists with quiet resilience. The emptiness of these plains is striking. Unlike the drama of coral reefs or the strangeness of trenches, the abyssal plains seem almost monotonous at first glance. They stretch in all directions with little to break the horizon of silt. Yet that very monotony creates a sense of infinity. Divers and cameras that touch down here often describe a disorienting impression of boundlessness, as though they have arrived in a space that has no edges. It is not difficult to see why such a setting stirs thoughts of eternity, of time unmeasured, of spaces meant more for silence than for life. Still, the plains are not without surprises. Strange organisms rise from the sediment like punctuation in the silence. Sea lilies anchor themselves with stalks that wave gently in the current. Translucent fish, their bodies almost invisible, drift near the bottom, their movements slow and ghost-like. Worms build delicate tubes that stand like fragile towers, each one a home for something unseen. Occasionally, the carcass of a whale or large fish falls to the plain, becoming a sudden oasis of life. For years afterward, its remains nourish entire communities, a brief but rich interruption in the desert's monotony. Then, once consumed, the silence returns, and the plain resumes its patient rhythm. Imagine standing on a plain that stretches farther than the eye can see, the ground beneath you soft and pale, the air silent, and the horizon unbroken in every direction. Only here it is water, not air, pressing endlessly against everything. The abyssal plains also carry a hidden role in shaping the planet. The sediments that settle here record history, layer upon layer, storing traces of climate, volcanic eruptions, and even the fall of meteors. They are the archives of Earth, written slowly in particles so small they can barely be seen. Scientists study these cores to learn about ages long past, peeling back time one layer at a time. The plains may appear empty, but in their silence they hold stories of worlds long gone, patiently kept in the dust of the ocean. What lingers most in thinking of the abyssal plains is the paradox they embody. They seem lifeless, yet they support countless species. They seem empty, yet they preserve the memory of ages. They stretch endlessly, yet they are filled with quiet detail for those who look closely enough. They are less dramatic than trenches or reefs, but perhaps more profound in their stillness. To meditate on them is to glimpse the scale of the ocean not as storm or fury, but as silence spread infinitely outward. And as our journey leaves these silent expanses behind, we turn toward waters where silence gave way to violence, where storms and battles claimed entire fleets, leaving history scattered across the seabed. In the 13th century, Kublai Khan, grandson of Genghis Khan and ruler of the vast Mongol Empire, sought to extend his reach across the sea. His armies had already conquered much of Asia, yet Japan remained unconquered, an island kingdom that resisted the might of his empire. Twice he gathered immense fleets, launching thousands of ships laden with soldiers, weapons, and ambition. Twice the fleets sailed eastward, darkening the horizon as they approached Japan's shores. And twice, the sea itself rose against them. Typhoons swept across the waters, tearing ships apart, scattering men, and sinking ambitions into the deep. What came to be remembered in Japan as the kamikaze, the divine winds, became the undoing of Kublai Khan's dreams of conquest. The scale of these expeditions was unprecedented for their time. The Mongols assembled vessels from across their empire, pressed into service from China and Korea, ranging from sturdy warships to hastily built transports. Thousands of soldiers filled their decks, armed with bows, swords, and the promise of swift victory. On land, the Mongols were nearly unstoppable, their armies feared for speed and strategy. But at sea, they placed their fate in fleets cobbled together under pressure, and the ocean proved less forgiving than the plains. As storms descended, ships collided, masts snapped, and hulls splintered against the rocks of Japan's coastline. Men drowned in the hundreds, entire divisions vanishing beneath waves that struck with the power of armies. For centuries, the story lived on mainly in chronicles and legend. The divine winds were celebrated in Japan as proof of protection by the gods, a reminder that even the mightiest empire could not overcome the island's spirit. The Mongol fleets, meanwhile, lay forgotten beneath layers of silt and sand. Only in recent decades have archaeologists begun to uncover their remains. Along the coast of Kyushu, divers have found timbers, anchors, and weapons preserved in the seabed. The discoveries confirm the scale of the disaster, with wreckage spread across wide areas, each fragment a piece of ambition undone. To touch these relics is to hold a moment of history when human will collided with nature's fury. The artifacts tell their own story. Iron anchors lie corroded but intact, their weight a reminder of the fleets that once tried to hold position against raging seas. Ceramic jars, once filled with provisions, sit shattered or buried, their contents long dissolved. Arrowheads, armor fragments, and even human remains have been found, carried down with the wrecks that became graves. The timbers of the ships, pulled from mud, still bear the marks of hurried construction. evidence of the pressure under which the fleet was assembled. These details give substance to what was once only legend, grounding it in the physical world of wood, iron, and salt water. Imagine walking the quiet beaches of Kyushu today, the waves lapping gently, knowing that centuries earlier those same waters rose in fury, toppling fleets and swallowing men whose names are long forgotten. The story of Kublai Khan's lost fleet is more than a tale of battle and defeat. It is a meditation on the limits of power. Even the greatest empire, armed with the largest armies, could not overcome the will of the sea. The typhoons that destroyed the fleets reshaped history, halting Mongol expansion eastward and reinforcing Japan's independence for centuries to come. The ocean became the ultimate arbiter, deciding the fate of empires with winds and waves. The wrecks that remain beneath the coast are not merely relics of war, but symbols of the fragility of human ambition when set against nature's force. Today, the lost fleet rests quietly, scattered beneath sand and sea grass, its timbers softened by time, its iron fused with stone. Divers continue to find fragments, each discovery adding another detail to a story already heavy with meaning. Yet the essence of the fleet's fate is already clear. The ocean that once rose in fury has kept their memory, preserving not ships alone but a moment when ambition stretched too far. The Mongol fleet lies in silence now, but its echoes remain, carried on waves that remind us that history, too, can be undone by the sea. And as we leave this tale of conquest broken by storm, we turn to other disasters at sea, where entire modern ships were lost not to empires or battles, but to sudden tragedies that still haunt memory. In 1845, two ships of the British Royal Navy, HMS Erebus and HMS Terror, set sail under the command of Sir John Franklin. Their mission was to chart the last untraversed sections of the Northwest Passage, the fabled sea route linking the Atlantic and Pacific through the Arctic's frozen archipelagos. They carried more than 100 men, provisions for years, and the confidence of an empire that believed no challenge was beyond its reach. Yet the ice of the far north proved otherwise. The ships vanished into the Arctic silence, leaving behind no survivors and only fragments of story that would haunt generations. For years, search parties scoured the icy wastes, hoping for word. What they found were hints of catastrophe, abandoned camps, scattered graves, and whispered accounts from Inuit hunters who had seen starving men stumbling across the ice. Some reports spoke of desperate measures, of crews reduced to cannibalism as supplies ran out and hope dissolved. Yet the fate of the ships themselves remained a mystery. Had they sunk beneath the ice? Had they been abandoned to drift until swallowed by the sea? Without evidence, speculation filled the silence, and the Franklin expedition became one of the great maritime enigmas of the 19th century. The story carried a weight that stretched far beyond the facts. It became a parable of hubris and tragedy, of human ambition colliding with the indifference of nature. The ships were equipped with the latest technology of the day, including iron hulls and steam engines to aid in ice navigation. But in the Arctic, such advantages meant little. The cold was absolute, the ice relentless. For the men trapped within, the long winters stretched endlessly, the darkness unbroken, the silence filled only with creaking timbers and the howl of wind across barren snowfields. One by one, hope must have ebbed away, replaced by the grim knowledge that rescue would never come. For more than a century and a half, the wrecks remained hidden. Expeditions continued into the 20th and 21st centuries, armed with sonar, icebreakers, and historical records pieced together from scattered clues. Finally, in 2014, HMS Erebus was located, resting in shallow Arctic waters. 2 years later, HMS Terror was found as well, astonishingly well preserved, its hull intact, its timbers sealed in cold that had protected them for more than a century. The discoveries were like windows into the past, their silent decks holding the unanswered questions of those final days. Why had the ships been abandoned? How had the crews struggled in their last desperate march across the ice? The wrecks confirmed presence but not conclusion. Imagine drifting down in a modern submersible toward the frozen outline of the Terror, its masts still upright, its windows staring blankly into the gloom, the seafloor littered with the relics of lives that ended more than a century ago. The finds brought closure, yet not resolution. Personal artifacts, boots, plates, tools, were retrieved, their ordinariness made haunting by context. They revealed the endurance of the men, their attempts to live as normally as possible in an utterly abnormal place. But the crucial details of their final fate remain beyond reach, locked away in the ice and silence of the North. Each discovery brings us closer, yet the mystery endures, held fast by the environment that claimed them. The Franklin expedition is no longer lost in geography, but in understanding. Today, The story is remembered as both tragedy and lesson. It is a tale of exploration at the edge of possibility, where ambition met limits that could not be overcome. The wrecks of the Erebus and Terror lie in Arctic waters as both graves and monuments, preserved by cold, sealed by silence. They remind us that even in the age of iron and steam, the sea and the ice remained stronger. And as we leave this story of frozen tragedy, our attention drifts back toward the darker, stranger depths of the world's oceans, where mysteries are not carved in ice, but hidden in the silence of trenches and the whispers of creatures still unseen. During the long shadow of the Cold War, when oceans became frontiers of silence and secrecy, submarines were more than vessels of steel. They were tools of hidden research, platforms for experiments whispered about but rarely confirmed. Beneath the waves, away from the eyes of satellites and spies, both sides of the divided world pursued technologies that promised an edge, propulsion systems that might leave no trail, cloaking devices meant to bend sound around a hull, and methods of surveillance that blurred the line between science and myth. Most of what was attempted remains unproven, sealed in classified files or lost to time. What endures are the rumors, scattered hints of forbidden research that suggest the sea itself became a laboratory for ambitions too risky to expose on land. Some of the most persistent whispers concern propulsion. Conventional submarines relied on propellers, noisy machines that betrayed their presence to listening ears. Experiments were said to explore magnetohydrodynamic drives, engines that pushed seawater using magnetic fields, leaving no moving parts and no cavitation trails. In theory, such drives would make a submarine nearly silent, able to slip through patrols without a trace. Though science has shown the concept is possible, evidence of successful deployment remains elusive. Submarines of the era never publicly revealed such capabilities, yet the rumors persisted, as if entire fleets of silent vessels prowled the depths, their presence marked only by unexplained sonar blips and uneasy encounters. Other experiments focused on stealth not through silence but through confusion. Stories told of attempts to cloak submarines from sonar detection, bending sound waves or scattering them to create false images. Some claimed experiments with special coatings that absorbed sound, turning hulls into acoustic shadows. Others spoke of devices that projected decoys, sending back misleading echoes that mimicked whales or distant ships. For every confirmed advance, there were twice as many unverified tales, details passed in whispers among sailors and analysts. The truth may have been more modest, yet the aura of secrecy allowed speculation to flourish, shaping the submarines of the Cold War into legends as much as machines. The notion of biological experiments also lingers. Some accounts describe submarines equipped with sensors to detect the movements of marine life, using the patterns of fish and whales as camouflage or warning systems. Others hint at attempts to manipulate these creatures, training dolphins or harnessing the migration of shoals as natural screens. Whether true or not, such stories blend the practical with the eerie, suggesting a willingness to use the ocean itself as both ally and experiment. In these tales, submarines became not only machines of war but participants in ecosystems of manipulation and deception. Imagine listening on sonar during a long night shift, the steady hum of machinery filling the cabin, when suddenly the screen flickers with shapes that move too deliberately to be whales, yet too strangely to be ships, and the unease that follows as no explanation comes. Part of what fuels the mystique of these experiments is the silence that surrounds them. Few official records exist in public view, and those that do are often vague or contradictory. Sailors returning from patrols spoke carefully, dropping hints of unusual missions without details. Researchers involved in testing seldom published results, leaving behind only rumors of breakthroughs never confirmed. In the absence of evidence, the human imagination filled the gaps, turning every unexplained sound or encounter into proof of forbidden technology at work. Whether or not these experiments succeeded, their legends endure because they capture a truth deeper than secrecy. The ocean is the perfect hiding place. Beneath miles of water, surrounded by silence and darkness, even failure can remain unseen. A submarine lost in an experiment could be written off as an accident, its wreck lying forever beyond reach. A device tested and discarded might never leave a trace, its existence preserved only in memory. What little emerges into public view comes decades later, when the details are blurred and certainty is impossible. The secret submarine experiments of the Cold War remain stories half believed, half doubted. They are fragments of ambition, glimpses of research that may have been too dangerous, too impractical, or too advanced for their time. Yet their endurance in memory points to the fascination they inspire. To think of submarines cloaked in silence, gliding unseen beneath fleets and coastlines, is to glimpse a world where the boundary between science and legend dissolves. And as these whispers fade back into the water, our attention turns toward other secrets buried deeper still. The ruins of civilizations lost to the tides, where stone monuments and drowned cities wait quietly beneath the sea. In the long catalogue of ocean mysteries, few stories blend fact and legend as seamlessly as the tale of the Philadelphia experiment. According to the myth, in 1943 the U.S. Navy conducted a secret test on the destroyer escort USS Eldridge, attempting to make the ship invisible to enemy detection. What began as whispers of radar cloaking soon spiraled into wilder claims that the vessel not only vanished from sight but was teleported hundreds of miles away, before reappearing in Philadelphia harbor. The story spread quietly at first, then more widely after the war, until it became one of the most famous maritime legends of the 20th century. And yet, for all its notoriety, evidence remains absent, leaving the tale suspended in the uneasy space between disbelief and fascination. The legend traces back to accounts circulated decades after the supposed event. Witnesses spoke of sailors watching the Eldridge shrouded in a strange green haze before disappearing altogether. Some claimed it reappeared in Norfolk, Virginia, hundreds of miles distant, only to vanish again and return to Philadelphia in moments. Others described horrific consequences for the crew. Men fused into the ship's metal, driven mad, or left disoriented by the experience. These stories, told with conviction, gave the legend its enduring power. They were not simply about technology but about human cost, about the dangers of tampering with forces beyond understanding. The U.S. Navy has consistently denied that such an experiment ever took place. Official records show the Eldridge serving in routine convoy duty during the war, with no indication of strange tests or teleportation. Historians point out that the supposed project aligns loosely with research into degaussing, a process that reduced ships' magnetic signatures to protect them from mines. Over time, this mundane practice may have been exaggerated into something more sensational. The green haze often described could have been nothing more than the glow of electrical discharges, seen by sailors unfamiliar with the equipment. In this interpretation, the Philadelphia experiment was never more than a misunderstanding, transformed into myth by rumor and imagination. Yet the myth persists, in part because it touches on themes larger than the specifics of the story. The Second World War was a time of rapid scientific advancement, from radar to nuclear power, and the sense that secret experiments were being conducted out of sight was not misplaced. Against this backdrop, the idea of a project that went too far feels plausible, even if the details are not. The very denial by authorities has fueled speculation, as though silence itself were proof that something extraordinary occurred. The legend of the Eldridge thrives because it feeds both skepticism and belief, both the demand for evidence and the hunger for mystery. Imagine standing on a dock in Philadelphia, watching as a destroyer escort slowly disappears into a shimmer of light, leaving only the rippling water where it once rested, and the uneasy silence of witnesses afraid to speak too loudly. The Philadelphia experiment also endures because it blurs the line between science and science fiction. Teleportation, cloaking, and invisibility are the stuff of novels and films, yet here they are tied to a real ship with a real name, a vessel that served in the war and whose history can be traced. This fusion of fact and fantasy gives the story its weight. It is not a legend of sea monsters or phantom ships, but of technology just out of reach, perhaps stumbled upon and then abandoned. The unease lies not in believing it happened exactly as told, but in wondering how close humanity might have come to such possibilities, and at what cost. Today, the USS Eldridge no longer sails, but its name remains bound to this myth. The Philadelphia experiment lives on in books, films, and whispered discussions, its details shifting but its essence unchanged. It is a story not easily dismissed because it is not only about one ship. It is about fear of the unknown, distrust of secrecy, and the thin veil between possibility and impossibility. Whether truth, mistake, or invention, it remains a tale that unsettles. And from this blurred experiment in legend and rumor, we drift next to even older mysteries, where not ships but entire cities seem to rest beneath the ocean, waiting for their stories to rise again. In the summer of 1956, the Italian liner Andrea Dore set out across the Atlantic, carrying with it all the elegance and optimism of post-war Europe. She was a ship built for both luxury and safety, celebrated for her grand design, fine dining, and reputation as a floating palace. Passengers filled her decks with laughter, enjoying the rhythm of an ocean crossing that promised comfort rather than hardship. Yet beneath this atmosphere of ease lay the ever-present truth of the sea, that even the finest vessel can meet disaster in a single night. The story of the Andrea Doria is remembered not only for the loss it brought but for the strange beauty of its wreck, which rests still beneath the waves as both grave and monument. On the night of July 25th, the Andrea Doria neared the coast of Nantucket, approaching the busy shipping lanes of the American seaboard. Fog settled thickly over the water, muting the horns of nearby vessels and cloaking the horizon. Through that fog came the Swedish liner Stockholm, moving on an intersecting course. Despite radar, radio, and warnings exchanged, confusion reigned in the haze. By the time the ships sighted one another, it was too late. The Stockholm struck the Andrea Doria amidships, its bow cutting deep into the liner's side with a force that shook both vessels. The collision tore open compartments and sealed the Italian ship's fate. Though badly damaged, the Andrea Doria did not sink immediately. Instead, she listed heavily, her starboard side rising high as water rushed in below. The list made lifeboats on one side unusable, complicating evacuation efforts. Yet amid the confusion and fear, acts of calm courage prevailed. Radio operators sent distress calls, and nearby ships rushed to assist. Over the course of hours, more than 1,600 passengers and crew were evacuated, many transferred by lifeboats in the dock, while others were hauled aboard rescuing vessels. The sea, which had delivered destruction, also offered a rare mercy, enough time for most lives to be saved. Still, 4 to 6 souls were lost that night, their hopes and stories ending in the cold Atlantic. The sinking of the Andrea Doria marked the end of an era. Once celebrated as unsinkable, modern liners were revealed to be as vulnerable as those before them. Air travel soon replaced ocean crossings as the preferred means of travel, leaving the grandeur of passenger liners to fade into nostalgia. The image of the Andrea Doria listing in the dawn light became one of the last great icons of ocean tragedy, a symbol of how quickly beauty could be undone by error and chance. Imagine drifting down today to the wreck, your light falling across tilted decks where once music played, windows shattered and corridors filled with silence, the outlines of luxury softened by silt and coral. The wreck of the Andrea Doria lies on the seabed more than 200 feet down, a haunting sight for divers who call it the Mount Everest of wreck diving. Her once proud hulls are now dangerous to explore, twisted and unstable, but they retain a ghostly echo of their former elegance. China and glassware still rest on tables, cabins remain furnished, and murals and mosaics, though faded, still hint at the beauty that once graced her interiors. Divers speak of the wreck with reverence, aware that it is both a time capsule and a grave, holding within it the weight of memory. Every descent is a journey into both history and silence. The tragedy of the Andrea Doria is remembered for its blend of loss and survival, for the juxtaposition of elegance and destruction. It is a story that reminds us how the sea strips away pretense, leaving only the truth of vulnerability. A ship celebrated for luxury was undone in minutes by fog, miscommunication, and fate. Her remains endure as a monument to that night, a reminder that safety is never absolute, and that the ocean's power waits quietly, patient and unyielding. And as we leave this wreck behind, we turn toward even older mysteries, where what lies beneath is not modern steel and glass, but the drowned remnants of civilizations forgotten by time. Beneath the calm surface of the ocean lie places touched not by storms or tempests, but by the hand of human ambition. During the Cold War, when nuclear power promised both progress and peril, the seas became hiding grounds for waste, accidents, and sunken vessels carrying atomic secrets. Submarines armed with nuclear reactors and weapons were lost to the depths, entire compartments of radioactive material settling silently onto the seafloor. In other places, barrels of nuclear waste were deliberately dumped, rolled from ships into the dock with little thought for the centuries ahead. Today, these sites remain scattered across the world's oceans, invisible on the surface yet carrying a weight of unease that endures in the silence below. Several nuclear-powered submarines have met their end underwater, each becoming both wreck and reactor sealed in steel. Among them are vessels lost in accidents, fires, or sudden disasters, their crews entombed along with the machinery of power. These submarines lie on seabeds thousands of feet deep, where pressure and darkness conceal them from view. Inside, their reactors may still hum faintly with radiation, sealed but never truly dormant. For decades, governments have monitored these wrecks with caution, wary of corrosion or leakage that could spread contamination into fragile ecosystems. The ocean's vastness dilutes much, but it cannot erase the knowledge that such hazards rest in silence, beyond easy reach. The practice of dumping nuclear waste at sea was once seen as practical, even routine. During the mid-20th century, barrels filled with radioactive material were cast overboard and left to sink. They rolled across continental slopes, scattered into canyons, and settled into mud where they remain to this day. Maps of these disposal sites exist, but the barrels themselves are difficult to locate or monitor. Some may already be corroding, their contents seeping slowly into currents. The scale of the ocean makes it nearly impossible to measure the full impact. Most waters remain within safe levels, yet the image of leaking barrels resting in darkness continues to trouble the imagination, as though the ocean were carrying secrets it should never have been asked to keep. And yet, life persists even in these shadowed places. Some research has found organisms clinging to wrecks, colonizing radioactive environments where one might expect nothing to survive. Microbes seem able to adapt, feeding on chemicals or resisting conditions harmful to most forms of life. Crabs, fish, and deep-sea creatures have been found in waters near contaminated sites, showing resilience that suggests survival can take unexpected forms. The thought that ecosystems might endure, even thrive, in irradiated waters raises questions that blur the line between hazard and mystery. What does it mean when life appears unbothered by radiation, shaping itself to fit even into places touched by humanity's most dangerous creations? Imagine diving in a submersible toward a wreck resting quietly on the seafloor, the beam of light revealing a corroded hull, and noticing small fish darting through gaps in the steel, as though unaware of the silent danger sealed within. For divers and scientists alike, the presence of radiation beneath the waves is both unsettling and strangely compelling. It represents the permanence of human actions in environments once thought untouchable. Long after wars have ended and policies have shifted, these submarines and barrels remain, their timelines measured not in decades but in centuries. They are markers of an age when secrecy and urgency overshadowed foresight, leaving behind relics that cannot simply be forgotten. Each wreck is a reminder of choices made under pressure, choices that the ocean now carries indefinitely. The mysteries of these sites persist because so little is known. The depths conceal them, political sensitivities obscure details, and time itself changes the risks in ways difficult to measure. What can be said with certainty is that the sea has become custodian to materials never meant to rest within it. Radiation beneath the waves is not myth or legend but reality, yet it carries with it the same unease. An invisible force, present but unseen, its influence stretching silently into the future. And as we drift onward from these irradiated graves, our path leads us toward even older enigmas, ruins and relics of civilizations drowned by rising seas, their stories written not in steel and radiation, but in stone and silence. Since the earliest days of flight, the ocean has claimed aircraft with the same quiet finality that it has long claimed ships. Planes that once roared across skies, filled with the sound of engines and the presence of crews, now lie scattered across seabeds, their aluminum and steel softened by salt and time. Some went down in storms, some in battle, others in accidents with no witnesses at all. Together they form a hidden fleet of another kind, resting not on runways or in hangars but beneath the waves. From the bombers of the Second World War to modern jets that slipped from radar screens, the ocean has become a silent archive of aviation's losses. During World War II, the Pacific and Atlantic were vast arenas of aerial combat. Bombers and fighters flew long missions over open water, often pushing the limits of their range. Many never returned. Some were shot down in battle, trailing smoke before plunging into the sea. Others simply vanished, fuel exhausted or instruments failing, their final moments known only to those aboard. Thousands of aircraft were lost this way, their crews entombed with them, leaving behind only coordinates marked missing. To this day, wrecks are still discovered on coral reefs, in lagoons, or deep in trenches, often remarkably preserved by the cold and pressure of their watery graves. The Cold War added another layer to the ocean's hidden airfields. Reconnaissance planes and patrol aircraft flew dangerous missions across remote seas, skirting coastlines and borders. Some disappeared under mysterious circumstances, their wrecks never recovered. These losses, shrouded in secrecy, fueled speculation about espionage and cover-ups. Families waited for answers that never came, the ocean holding its silence. In many cases, no wreckage ever surfaced, leaving only questions behind. The absence itself became part of the mystery, as though the sea had swallowed not only the machines but the stories they carried. Modern times have brought their own tragedies. Commercial jets, equipped with advanced navigation and communication systems, have still been lost to the ocean. Storms, malfunctions, and rare but catastrophic accidents remind us that even now, flight is not immune to the sea's reach. Each loss carries a heavy toll, not only in lives but in the haunting uncertainty left behind. Wreckage searches stretch across months or years, scouring vast swaths of ocean with sonar and remote vehicles. Sometimes fragments are found, sometimes not. The immensity of the sea ensures that even in an age of satellites, answers can remain hidden. For divers who have explored aircraft wrecks, the experience is haunting. A fuselage lies broken across the sand, wings tilted awkwardly, propellers bent. In cockpits, dials and controls remain, frozen in positions last touched by human hands. Around them, coral and fish weave through the remains, claiming them as reefs. These sites are both monuments and ecosystems, reminders of sudden loss transformed into habitats. The silence around them is profound, not only because of where they rest but because of how abruptly their journeys ended. A plane built for the skies, now resting forever in the quiet of the deep, embodies a contrast as striking as any shipwreck. Imagine gliding past the skeletal frame of a bomber resting on its belly, the glass of its nose shattered, its gun turrets empty, as schools of fish drift through its hollow body like passengers on a voyage that never ended. The number of aircraft lost to the oceans is impossible to calculate fully. They lie in every sea, across every decade since humans first flew over water. Some have been located and studied, others remain only as dots on maps marked last known position. Their presence lingers in memory and in myth, fueling stories of disappearances that may never be explained. Each plane beneath the waves represents not only technology and tragedy but also the limits of recovery in the vastness of the sea. The ocean does not easily surrender what it takes. Planes lost to its depths endure as symbols of silence, scattered across miles of sea flu. They remind us that even the sky's conquerors are not beyond the reach of the sea, and that in its keeping, stories of bravery, error, and chance rest together in quiet company. And as our attention drifts from these silent wrecks, we turn to older mysteries still, where not machines but entire cities are said to lie beneath the tides, carrying with them the memory of civilizations undone. The story of Atlantis begins not in the sea itself but in the writings of Plato, who described a great island civilization said to have vanished beneath the waves. Over centuries, this tale grew into one of the most enduring legends of all time, inspiring countless searches for a lost city of marvels. Yet when considered calmly, the meaning of Atlantis shifts. Rather than proof of a vanished empire, it may instead reflect something deeper and more universal: the human memory of floods, storms, and coasts swallowed by rising seas. The story becomes less a map to treasure and more a mirror of our long relationship with water and loss. Plato's account spoke of a powerful island nation that grew wealthy and proud before meeting sudden destruction, sinking into the ocean in a single day and night. His intention may not have been literal geography but allegory, a way of warning against hubris and decline. Still, the image he offered was vivid enough to endure. Readers across centuries imagined glittering palaces, advanced technologies, and an entire world hidden beneath the waves. From explorers of the Renaissance to modern seekers with sonar and submersibles, Atlantis has remained an irresistible possibility. That somewhere on the seafloor lies a civilization erased from history. But another interpretation views the legend as a cultural echo. Throughout human history, rising seas have reshaped coastlines, swallowing settlements and erasing familiar lands. At the end of the last ice age, glacier melted and oceans rose hundreds of feet, flooding valleys and plains where early people once lived. Myths of great floods appear in nearly every culture, from Mesopotamia to India to the Americas, suggesting shared memory of those transformations. Atlantis may have been Plato's retelling of stories already old in his time, a memory of lands lost to water dressed in the form of a parable. In this sense, the legend speaks not of a single place but of countless forgotten shores. The appeal of Atlantis lies in this duality. On one hand, it is the dream of discovery, a sunken city waiting to be found, proof of mysteries preserved in the deep. On the other, it is a recognition of fragility, that what is solid today can vanish tomorrow, reclaimed by the sea without warning. Both meanings touch something deep in the human imagination, something that draws us toward the ocean with both longing and unease. To seek Atlantis is to seek not just a lost city but reassurance that the past still holds secrets we might recover. Imagine standing at the edge of a stormy coast, the waves striking hard against cliffs, and feeling the thought that entire worlds may once have rested out where the horizon now meets the water. Modern research continues to test the legend, mapping the seafloor with increasing detail. Ruins have been claimed in the Mediterranean, in the Caribbean, and even beneath the sands of deserts once filled with water. Most are natural formations or misinterpretations, yet the search itself is telling. It reflects our desire to connect myth with reality, to turn memory into monument. Whether Atlantis existed or not becomes less important than what the legend reveals about ourselves. Our fascination with origins, our fear of loss, and our recognition that the sea has always been more powerful than human ambition. Atlantis remains, then, not as a city to be found but as an idea. It is the name we give to the memory of floods and the fragility of coasts, to the sense that beneath every wave lies a story unfinished. As the sea rises and falls across ages, civilizations adapt, retreat, or vanish, leaving behind only myths. Plato's tale endures because it captures this truth in a form both haunting and timeless. And from this meditation on memory and myth, we move toward other drowned worlds, not imagined but real, where divers have touched stones and walls long hidden beneath the sea. Beneath the tides of certain coasts lie shapes that seem too deliberate to be explained away as chance. Off the shore of India, in the Gulf of Cambat, sonar surveys have revealed outlines of what appear to be walls, streets, and foundations stretching across the seabed. Divers have recovered artifacts, beads, tools, and pottery fragments that suggest human presence long before these coasts were swallowed by the sea. Whether these discoveries represent true cities or simply natural formations later used by early settlements remains debated. Yet the impression is undeniable. Ancient temples and structures do rest beneath the ocean, silent reminders that shorelines are never permanent and civilizations sometimes slip below the waves. In the Gulf of Cambat, currents are strong and visibility poor, making exploration difficult. Still, enough has been glimpsed to stir fascination. Long, straight lines appear where geology typically favors curves and fractures. Piles of stone suggest deliberate placement. Objects brought up from the depths have been dated by some researchers to thousands of years before the known rise of complex urban centers in the region. If confirmed, such dates would rewrite timelines of human history, pointing toward cultures far older than once imagined. Others, however, argue that these artifacts were carried there by rivers or storms, separated from their original contexts. The debate remains unresolved, caught between possibility and skepticism. India is not the only place where the sea guards ancient ruins. Off the coast of Japan, near Yonaguni, divers have swum through what looks like a sunken monument of terraces and steps. In the Mediterranean, cities once thriving along the shore now rest beneath shallow waters, their temples and columns toppled yet recognizable. In the Caribbean, divers have reported geometric patterns on the seabed that seem to mimic roads and plazas. Some of these sites are confirmed, the result of gradual subsidence or rising seas. Others remain speculative, their status hovering between geology and archaeology. But together, they build a picture of a world in which oceans have repeatedly reshaped human history. The presence of submerged temples raises questions beyond archaeology. They remind us that sea levels have not always been stable. At the end of the last ice age, melting glacier raised oceans by hundreds of feet, drowning vast stretches of land that once connected continents and cradled settlements. Coastal villages, shrines, and perhaps entire cities would have been lost. The ruins we see today may be only fragments, glimpses of a far larger story buried beneath silt. If true, then human civilization may have deeper roots than our current record suggests, roots hidden in places we are only beginning to explore. Imagine diving into murky waters, the beam of your light falling across a row of carved stones, their edges softened by centuries of currents, and feeling the weight of lives once lived in spaces now silent and submerged. These sites also reveal how memory transforms into myth. Legends of drowned lands, Atlantis in Greece, Dwarka in India, or cities claimed by the sea in Celtic tradition, may all be echoes of real floods that erased familiar places. Oral histories, passed through generations, hold fragments of truth shaped by loss and awe. When divers today find remnants of walls or staircases beneath the sea, those myths feel less like inventions and more like recollections, carried across centuries in story until rediscovered in stone. What gives submerged temples their haunting power is not certainty but ambiguity. We see stones and patterns, but we cannot hear the voices that once filled them. We can measure dates, but we cannot know the daily lives erased by tides. Each site becomes both a question and an answer, proof that the sea holds history while refusing to reveal it fully. They remind us that the boundary between land and water is always shifting, and that what is solid today may be lost tomorrow. The ancient temples beneath the sea remain as thresholds between the known and the forgotten. They are not simply ruins but reminders of impermanence, of civilizations erased by forces beyond their control. To reflect on them is to sense the fragility of our own shores, our own cities, and the certainty that the ocean, patient and immense, will one day take them too. And from these submerged monuments, our path moves further into the silence of forgotten worlds, toward whole cities that rest beneath tides, their streets and walls preserved in watery graves. Millennia ago, the Black Sea may have been a very different place, smaller, shallower, and cut off from the world's oceans. Some geologists and historians suggest that what we know today as a vast inland sea was once a freshwater lake, surrounded by early settlements. Then, in a moment of geological upheaval, the barrier at the Bosporus Strait gave way, allowing the waters of the Mediterranean to surge northward. The event would have been catastrophic for those who lived along its shores. Villages drowned, farmland swallowed, and lives uprooted in a flood that seemed to come without warning. This theory of a sudden inundation has become one of the most compelling attempts to explain why stories of great floods echo through so many cultures. The idea gained strength in the late 20th century, when researchers studying the seafloor of the Black Sea discovered evidence suggesting a dramatic shift. Layers of sediment hinted at a sudden change from freshwater to saltwater species, as though an ocean had invaded an inland lake. Ancient shorelines, now submerged hundreds of feet below the present surface, supported the image of a world once different. If the theory holds, the flooding would have been both rapid and destructive, raising the sea level dramatically in a matter of months or years. For the people who lived there, it would have felt like the end of their world, a deluge beyond comprehension. The cultural echoes of such a flood may have spread far and wide. In Mesopotamia, stories of a great inundation survive in the Epic of Gilgamesh, where a lone survivor builds an ark to withstand the waters. In the Hebrew Bible, Noah's story carries striking similarities, telling of destruction and renewal brought by overwhelming floodwaters. In Greek tradition, Deucalion and Pyrrha survive a world-drowning storm by seeking refuge on high ground. Though these myths arise from different lands, their themes are alike: water overwhelming human life, followed by survival and the rebirth of civilization. If the Black Sea flood truly occurred, it may have been one of the real events that seeded these enduring legends. Not all scientists agree. Some argue that the flooding of the Black Sea was gradual rather than sudden, a slow rise that displaced communities but did not shock them overnight. Others suggest that local floods from rivers and storms, repeated across generations, could have produced the cultural memory of deluge without requiring one cataclysmic event. The debate continues, fueled by new studies and contested interpretations. What remains certain is that human beings have always lived close to water, and water has always had the power to destroy as well as to sustain. Whether sudden or slow, the encroachment of the sea would have left deep impressions on those who witnessed it. Imagine standing on the edge of that ancient lake, watching as waters begin to surge over the land, creeping at first, then rushing, until homes and fields vanish beneath the rising tide, leaving only silence in their wake. For modern explorers, the Black Sea continues to yield clues. Underwater surveys have located submerged structures that may once have been dwellings, preserved by the sea's oxygen-poor depths. Wooden beams, tools, and even seeds have been found, offering glimpses of daily life before the waters rose. These finds lend weight to the idea that real communities were drowned here, their memories carried forward in myth long after their names were forgotten. Each discovery ties the geological theory more closely to human experience, transforming sediment and shorelines into stories of families displaced, of worlds lost to the sea. The legends of the Black Sea flood matter not only as history but as reflection. They remind us that myth often carries kernels of truth, memories reshaped but not erased. To read these flood stories across cultures is to see humanity grappling with the same force. The sea rising without mercy, reshaping lives and landscapes. Whether sudden catastrophe or gradual change, the Black Sea stands as a possible source of one of humanity's most enduring narratives, that of the deluge, the waters that came and never returned. And as we turn from these ancient floods, our course drifts toward the Mediterranean, where cities of stone and marble now rest beneath clear waters, still bearing the imprint of human hands. Beneath the gentle waters of the Mediterranean, entire cities once alive with commerce and ritual now rest in silence. Along the Egyptian coast, divers have rediscovered places like Heracleion and Canopus, names once thought lost to history. For centuries, these cities existed only in faded texts and faint memory, their true locations uncertain. Then, in recent decades, their remains emerged from the seabed, preserved in the mud and sand where they had lain undisturbed for more than 1,000 years. To descend among them is to step into streets that once bustled with voices, markets, and the rituals of temples, now populated only by drifting fish and currents. Heracleion was once a great port, a gateway through which traders and pilgrims entered Egypt. Its harbors welcomed ships heavy with grain, spices, and treasures, while its temples drew those seeking favor from the gods. Statues stood tall, carved in stone, overlooking the sea that carried wealth and power to its gates. But over time, the land shifted, the weight of buildings pressed into soft ground, and earthquakes and floods finally delivered the city to the waves. Buried beneath layers of sediment, it disappeared, its memory fading until explorers of our own time traced its outlines once more. Today, divers swim past colossal statues lying broken on the seabed, their faces still serene, their arms stretched as if waiting for worshippers who will never return. Nearby, Canopus carried its own renown. Famous for its temples and for stories of healing rituals, it was a city of both devotion and pleasure. Like Heracleion, it too sank beneath the shifting earth and rising waters. Its streets and courtyards, once filled with processions and gatherings, now rest beneath currents that sweep quietly above. Archaeologists have found fragments of daily life, coins, pottery, jewelry, and tools, each object a reminder that these were not mythical places but real cities where people lived, traded, and prayed. The recovery of such fragments is less about treasure than about presence, the return of voices once drowned in silence. The scale of what lies beneath the Mediterranean is striking. Entire temples have been uncovered, their columns toppled but still aligned. Walls of houses trace patterns of neighborhoods, and harbors hold the remains of ships long forgotten. These discoveries show not isolated ruins but entire landscapes, preserved as if waiting for rediscovery. They remind us that the sea is not only a place of natural mystery but also a keeper of history, holding in its depths chapters of human civilization erased from the land above. Imagine drifting down through clear water, your light sweeping across a stone avenue where once sandals and carts passed, now covered in sand but unmistakable, as if time itself had simply paused beneath the waves. What makes these sunken cities haunting is not only their loss but their familiarity. They were places of life and culture, part of the known world, not distant myths. Their disappearance shows how fragile even the strongest societies can be when earth and water shift. Earthquakes, floods, and the slow subsidence of land conspired with rising seas to erase them from view, a reminder that the sea has always had the power to reclaim what humans build. To walk among their ruins today is to feel or tempered with humility, a recognition that permanence is an illusion along the shifting boundary between land and water. The rediscovery of Heracleion, Canopus, and other sunken cities has given us more than artifacts. It has given us a new sense of continuity, connecting our present lives with those who once lived on shores now drowned. It shows that the sea does not destroy so much as preserve, keeping memory intact until curiosity and persistence bring it back into light. These cities rest quietly, yet they speak to us still, inviting reflection on the passing of time and the certainty that all coasts are temporary. And from these waters of Egypt and Greece, our path moves outward, toward ruins even older and more elusive, where myth and archaeology continue to overlap in the search for civilizations that may never fully return. Beneath the turquoise waters of the Caribbean, divers and explorers have reported ruins that stir both fascination and doubt. Off the coast of Cuba, sonar surveys in the early 2000s revealed what appeared to be large geometric structures deep below the waves, patterns that some interpreted as walls, roads, or even pyramids. In the shallows near Bimini in the Bahamas, stone formations known as the Bimini Road stretch in straight lines that resemble a man-made pathway. These discoveries have fueled speculation about forgotten civilizations, drowned cities, and the possibility that human history holds chapters erased by the sea. Yet for every claim of vanished builders, there are counterarguments pointing toward geology, natural formations shaped into suggestion by currents and imagination. The Cuban structures first drew attention when researchers mapping the seabed detected unusual shapes at depths of more than 2,000 feet. The sonar images seemed to show large blocks arranged in patterns, some rectangular, others resembling terraces or plazas. The scale of the formations was immense, too vast for simple explanation. To those inclined toward belief, they looked like the remains of an ancient city, a metropolis swallowed by the ocean long before recorded history. The depth at which they rested only added to the mystery, for such submersion would suggest a date thousands of years older than any known civilization of the Americas. For a moment, the possibility of a lost world beneath Caribbean waters seemed tantalizingly real. Skeptics, however, pointed out that sonar images can be misleading. What appears as sharp geometry may in fact be natural rock ridges or outcrops. Without clear photographs or recovered artifacts, the evidence remains inconclusive. Expeditions to the site have been limited, and visibility at such depths is poor, leaving the mystery unresolved. Some argue the formations are nothing more than volcanic features shaped by fault lines and erosion, their regularity an illusion created by human interpretation. Still, the sonar scans linger in memory, suggestive enough to keep speculation alive. The Bimini Road offers a more accessible example, lying only 20 feet below the surface in the Bahamas. Here, massive blocks of stone lie in a neat, curving line, as though marking the path of a sunken causeway. Divers describe the experience of swimming along it as walking through a gateway into legend. Proponents of the man-made theory claim that the blocks resemble cut limestone, arranged too deliberately to be coincidence. They connect the site to myths of Atlantis or to the possibility of a long-lost island culture erased by rising seas at the end of the Ice Age. The stones, they argue, are evidence that human civilization in the Americas stretches back much further than we have believed. Geologists offer a different explanation. The Bimini stones, they say, are examples of beach rock, a natural formation created when sand and shells cement together over time and then fracture into rectangular slabs. Currents can shift and align these slabs, creating the illusion of deliberate placement. From this perspective, the Bimini Road is no road at all, but simply geology mistaken for architecture. Yet even this explanation does not strip away the mystery entirely. The sheer neatness of the formation, the way the blocks align and seem to guide divers forward, ensures that questions remain. It may be natural, but it feels intentional, and that feeling alone has kept its legend alive. Imagine swimming in clear Caribbean light, the seafoam bright beneath you, and following a line of massive stones as it curves away into the distance, half road, half riddle, leaving you uncertain whether you are moving through nature's design or humanity's forgotten past. Both the Cuban anomaly and the Bimini Road reveal how the ocean blurs the line between fact and myth. They show how easily patterns can be seen in stone, how quickly imagination can turn geology into archaeology. But they also remind us that the sea has swallowed countless coasts, and that some mysteries may yet prove real. Whether natural or built, these formations speak to a deeper truth, that the ocean guards its secrets well, and that human history may not be as complete as we believe. From these Caribbean puzzles, our journey turns next to other waters where civilizations truly did fall beneath the sea, their ruins confirmed and their stories still unfolding in silence. Across nearly every culture on Earth, stories of great floods appear, carried through generations in myths, scriptures, and oral traditions. From the river valleys of Mesopotamia to the highlands of South America, from the Pacific Islands to the plains of India, humanity has remembered water rising suddenly, sweeping away homes, fields, and entire worlds. The similarities between these tales are striking: a warning ignored, a deluge unleashed, survival won by a few who carry forward life. While details differ, the names of the survivors, the gods who sent the waters, the lands submerged, the core remains the same. Something vast and destructive happened, and people never forgot. These stories, told with reverence and awe, may reflect not only imagination but memory, rooted in times when seas truly rose to reshape the earth. The Mesopotamian flood story, preserved in the Epic of Gilgamesh, is among the oldest. There, Utnapishtim is warned by the gods to build a great vessel, saving his family and animals from the waters that drown the world. The Hebrew Bible carries a parallel tale in Noah, who rides out the flood in his ark. In India, ancient texts tell of Manu, guided by a fish to build a boat that preserves humanity. Among the Greeks, Deucalion and Pyrrha survive a deluge sent by Zeus, repopulating the world after the waters recede. These myths arose in different lands, yet their themes overlap too precisely to be coincidence. They point toward a shared anxiety, perhaps even shared experience, of floodwaters overwhelming human life. In the Americas, similar stories appear. The Maya spoke of previous worlds destroyed by water before the creation of the present age. Tribes of North America preserved tales of rising seas that forced migrations, mountains becoming islands, and canoes carrying the last survivors. Across the Pacific, island cultures tell of storms and floods that reshaped their shores, erasing villages and scattering people across the ocean. In Australia, Aboriginal traditions describe coastlines swallowed by the sea, stories passed on for thousands of years that align with geological evidence of rising waters after the last ice age. These are not isolated legends but a chorus of memory, spread across continents, echoing the same fear. Science provides a frame for these stories. At the end of the Ice Age, between 12,000 and 7,000 years ago, glacier melted and global sea levels rose dramatically. Coastlines shifted, fertile valleys flooded, and lands that once connected continents vanished beneath the ocean. The Black Sea may have filled suddenly, drowning settlements along its shores. Doggerland, once linking Britain to Europe, disappeared beneath the North Sea. Around the world, countless coastal communities would have seen their worlds transformed in ways that must have felt apocalyptic. For them, survival meant retreating inland, carrying not only their lives but their memories. Over generations, those memories became myths, reshaped into the stories we still tell today. Imagine hearing the voice of an elder by a fire, telling how the sea once rose without warning, how people fled to higher ground, and how only a few endured. The story repeated so often it becomes truth for millennia. The endurance of flood myths shows how powerfully water shapes human thought. They are not merely tales of destruction but also of renewal. In nearly every version, survivors carry forward seeds, animals, or knowledge, ensuring life continues. The waters cleanse, but they also mark a new beginning. This dual nature reflects the reality of floods, devastating in the moment, transformative in the long span of history. They are stories of fear, but also of resilience. The great flood stories of humanity remain unresolved in meaning, balanced between myth and memory. Whether describing specific events or reflecting broader patterns of rising seas, they remind us of the fragility of our place on shifting coasts. They are warnings dressed as legends, echoes of times when water redrew the world's map. And as we leave these timeless tales, our journey turns to the silence of endings, to final reflections on how much of the ocean still lies beyond reach, guarding mysteries it may never allow us to see. Across the wide oceans of human imagination, few myths are as alluring as those of Lemuria and Mu. These names, whispered into history through the 19th and 20th centuries, describe lost continents said to have stretched across the Indian and Pacific Oceans. To believers, they were vast homelands of ancient peoples, advanced cultures that flourished before vanishing beneath the sea. To skeptics, they are products of speculation, born from misinterpretations of geology and archaeology. Yet even as myths, Lemuria and Mu reveal something deeply human, a longing for hidden worlds, for the idea that our history is incomplete, that beneath the waves lie civilizations waiting to be rediscovered. The idea of Lemuria first emerged in the 19th century, when scientists puzzled over the distribution of lemurs and other species across Madagascar, India, and Africa. Before the theory of plate tectonics was widely understood, some proposed that a great landmass must once have connected these regions. This hypothetical continent was named Lemuria. Over time, the scientific idea was abandoned as geology advanced, but the name lived on, carried into the realm of myth. Writers and mystics transformed Lemuria into a vanished paradise, a land of wisdom and spiritual knowledge that slipped beneath the waves long ago. The shift from science to legend did not weaken the idea, it gave it new life, casting Lemuria as a symbol of what humanity longs to find beneath the sea. Mu followed a similar path, entering popular imagination through the writings of explorers and early archaeologists. In the late 19th century, Augustus Le Plongeon interpreted Mayan texts as describing a lost continent called Mu, said to have sunk beneath the Pacific. Later authors expanded on the story, placing Mu as a sprawling civilization across the ocean, home to peoples who left traces in Polynesia, the Americas, and Asia. Like Atlantis, Mu became a canvas for speculation, a stage on which theories of lost knowledge and forgotten origins could be drawn. The scientific community found little to support it, but the legend spread, shaping novels, lectures, and the imaginations of those who dreamed of civilizations erased by tides. The appeal of these lost continents lies in their suggestion of incompleteness. Human history feels too brief when compared to the age of the Earth, and myths like Lemuria and Mu offer bridges to deeper timelines. They suggest that cultures older and wiser than ours may have thrived before being erased, leaving only faint memories in myth and oral tradition. In this way, the stories resonate with real truths. Sea levels did rise dramatically at the end of the Ice Age, drowning coasts and settlements. Ancient ruins do lie beneath the waves, from Egypt to India to Japan. The difference between myth and memory is often blurred, and into that blur step the legends of Lemuria and Mu. Imagine standing on a quiet shore, gazing out across endless water, and wondering if beneath those waves lie cities, temples, and voices from civilizations we can no longer see. Even though modern geology shows no evidence for vast continents sinking whole into the sea, the persistence of these myths says much about human imagination. They are not about maps or rocks alone, but about yearning, for discovery, for mystery, for the sense that our story is larger than what has been written. Lemuria and Mu survive in books, in spiritual teachings, in whispered conversations, not because they are proven, but because they symbolize what we hope still waits to be found. In the end, the legends of lost continents remind us of our fascination with what lies hidden. They show how we weave gaps in knowledge into tales of grandeur, how we turn uncertainty into narrative. Lemuria and Mu may never have existed as lands, but as ideas, they endure. And from these imagined continents, our attention turns toward what is undeniably real: the enduring myths of floods and drowned worlds that unite cultures across the globe, hinting that memory, not fantasy, may hold the truest mysteries of the sea. In oceans across the world, divers and explorers have stumbled upon ruins that resist simple explanation. They are not grand cities like Heracleon or neatly debated monuments like Yonaguni, but fragments scattered across coastlines and seabeds, often too isolated or peculiar to fit neatly into history. A stretch of stones that looks like a road disappearing into the water. Walls that rise where no settlement is recorded. Blocks of stone stacked in patterns too regular to be dismissed as random. Each of these sites lingers in the space between archaeology and enigma, provoking questions that remain unanswered. They are ruins that shouldn't exist, at least not according to our current maps of the past. One such place lies near the coast of the Bahamas, where beyond the famous Bimini Road are other formations less publicized but equally curious. Divers have reported stone alignments extending beyond the shallow reefs, as though they were once breakwaters or harbor walls. Their placement suggests function, but without artifacts or clear cultural links, they remain ambiguous. Similar reports come from the Mediterranean, where supposed causeways vanish beneath waves, leading nowhere but into deeper water. Are these remnants of ports and roads claimed by rising seas, or are they natural formations that happen to mimic human design? The answer never seems to settle. In India, off the coast of Tamil Nadu, divers exploring after the 2004 tsunami uncovered structures long hidden by sand. Stone walls, carved pillars, and foundations appeared suddenly, sparking speculation that myths of ancient cities swallowed by the sea might hold truth. While some archaeologists see them as genuine remnants of ancient ports or temples, others caution that underwater erosion can shape stone into deceptively regular forms. The debate, as always, remains open. Such discoveries blur the line between myth and geology, suggesting that the ocean itself is a curator of puzzles designed to resist certainty. Elsewhere, in the Mediterranean, structures off the coast of Malta and Spain have raised similar questions. Blocks arranged in rows, what appear to be jetties or breakwaters, hint at maritime activity far older than the written record. Yet their dating is elusive, and without clear cultural artifacts, they remain unresolved. The sea preserves but also conceals, allowing only fragments to surface. Those fragments may confirm old myths of vanished cultures, or they may simply reflect the patterns our minds impose on chance alignments of stone. The ambiguity is what keeps the fascination alive. Imagine swimming across a shallow seabed, the sand parting to reveal a stretch of rectangular stones, each fitting against the next like a paved path, disappearing into darkness where your light cannot reach. The strangeness of these ruins lies not only in their form but in their implications. If they are natural, they challenge us to recognize how easily nature can imitate artifice. If they are artificial, they suggest human activity older or more widespread than history records. Both outcomes stir unease. One by showing us how unreliable our perceptions can be, the other by pointing towards civilizations we have lost entirely. The ruins remain on the threshold of certainty, and in that threshold lies their power. Archaeology thrives on evidence, but the ocean makes evidence slippery. Currents bury structures in sand, storms scatter artifacts, and corrosion erases detail. Even when divers recover fragments, they rarely tell a full story. A block may be cut by human hands, or fractured naturally in ways that resemble tool marks. A line of stones may be a wall, or a ridge shaped by geological stress. The sea ensures that proof is always partial, never absolute. And so, the ruins stay unresolved, their meaning suspended between possibility and doubt. What makes these sites compelling is not that they answer questions, but that they leave them open. They remind us that the seafloor is vast, and that history is far from complete. The ruins that shouldn't exist are not obstacles to knowledge, but invitations to humility, urging us to recognize the limits of what we know. They sit in silence, daring us to keep wondering. And as we move from these unanswered puzzles, we approach the end of our long journey, drifting toward a final reflection on the mysteries of the deep, where awe and unease linger together in the dark. The ocean is a place of endings and beginnings, a world that has swallowed ships, cities, and stories, yet continues to pulse with life beyond measure. To drift in thought beneath its surface is to feel the weight of time pressing down, a reminder that for all our searching, most of its secrets remain sealed. Across these waters lie wrecks of steel and wood, bones of sailors, and monuments of stone, each one a fragment of history kept in silence. There are creatures that glow in the dark, sounds that defy explanation, and ruins that blur the line between memory and myth. Together they create a portrait not of certainty, but of wonder, an endless horizon of questions that soothe as much as they unsettle. The ocean's vastness resists ownership. We map it in outlines, we probe its depths with machines, but its heart remains hidden. Even with satellites and sonar, we have seen only the surface of what it holds. Most of its floor is unmapped, its trenches visited only a handful of times, its ecosystems barely touched by knowledge. This immensity offers comfort in its permanence. No matter how far human ambition reaches, the sea keeps its mysteries, as if protecting a realm beyond our grasp. It is not hostile so much as indifferent, watching civilizations rise and fall without yielding its depths to their desires. For those who listen, the sea offers not answers but echoes. The hum of hydrophones, the grainy images of wrecks, the fleeting glimpse of an unknown creature, all are reminders of how fragile our understanding is. Myths of Atlantis, legends of sea serpents, and stories of vanished fleets are not just curiosities, but reflections of our own limits. We tell these stories because we cannot help but fill the silence with imagination. And yet, the silence always remains, deep and unmoved, reminding us that there is more beyond what we can see. Imagine sitting on the deck of a ship at night, the waves rolling softly, the stars overhead mirrored by faint sparks of bioluminescence below, and feeling the vastness of it all as though you are suspended between two infinities. Nostalgia clings to the sea as strongly as mystery. The Titanic resting in darkness, the Andrea Doria tilted on its side, the submarines entombed with their crews, all evoke not only tragedy but also the passage of eras. They are symbols of ambition undone and time preserved, caught between the world of the living and the silence of the deep. The ruins of cities, whether proven or imagined, carry similar weight. They remind us that coasts shift, floods rise, and civilizations pass, leaving only whispers behind. To reflect on them is to acknowledge the impermanence of our own world, the certainty that one day our cities too may rest beneath waves. What soothes is not resolution, but the steady rhythm of the ocean itself. Its currents move as they always have, its tides rise and fall in patterns that long outlast any empire. The mysteries that lie beneath are part of its nature, not flaws to be solved but qualities to be accepted. The sea holds its secrets tightly, and in doing so, it gives us something rare, a reminder that not everything can be known. In a world that seeks explanation for all things, the ocean offers the gift of mystery, a calm resistance to closure. And so, the reflections end where they began, with awe, unease, and quiet wonder. The sea keeps its silence, and we are left listening, knowing that beneath the waves lie truths we may never reach. That is its power, to leave us not with answers, but with the calm certainty of mystery itself, a presence as endless and unresolved as the ocean's own horizon.